No one misses out on anything. Everything open on your end?
Everything's open, just make sure that you are
On our own
unmuted,
mics.
whenever you're speaking, because
Yep.
we have people that are remote.
Yep.
Particularly remote, joining on WebEx, but also just viewing on Facebook and on YouTube.
Alrighty. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and, we're getting all kinds of feedback. Is that better now, or, because we were getting feedback a second ago? It's okay now?
It should be a little bit better.
Okay.
Just try to individually turn your mics on and off when you want to speak.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call to order this, public hearing of the Killingley Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission, and we will start with a roll call. Would you like to do the roll call for us? Or, Karina, you're here.
I'm here.
Yes, go for it.
Sandy Eggers.
Here.
Rodney Galton.
Here.
Phil Archer. I'm sorry, Paul Archer.
Here.
Chris McDonald.
Here.
Rainey Legault.
Here.
Karina Torrey present.
And Amy Sterling is absent with notification. Okay, as I said, thank you all for coming. The public hearing setting this evening, just so everyone knows what we're going to do, I'm going to ask Jonathan Blake from the town planning staff to just give a quick overview, and also if you would give them a little bit of a rundown and a summary of testimony that has come in already. We won't read them all into the record, but they're available for anyone to look at, and he'll give a rundown, explain to you what we're going to do. Then we'll ask the applicants to actually come and give their presentation, and then I'm going to ask even our own board to wait until that is complete. I think we owe everyone the respect of getting their say, and we don't want to jump around too much. We want to make sure everyone here this evening gets a chance to speak. So we'll listen to their entire presentation, and then we will start with our members with their responses and questions to you first, and then we'll open it up. There's a lot of you here. I'd like to hold everybody to a 3-minute window for their initial comments, because we want to make sure you have a chance to speak. And then just remember, though, that this is the wetlands portion of the public hearing. There's a lot of other issues that do not pertain to wetlands. There's a lot of issues that are our concern, and those are the ones that we have to address. All right, so I guess, Jonathan?
Just a little housekeeping. So we have adoption of minutes first. And then
No, we didn't have, because this is a public hearing.
we can go back. I have at the 5th item for public hearing. But
Adoption of minutes, we didn't do it.
You want to do it that way?
And then citizens participation.
we should do it in order.
All right, okay. All righty, then, we will do the minutes of the February 2nd meeting. I thought we'd do the public hearing first, but we'll get everything out of the way.
These are quick things.
Sure, okay. Okay,
Motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
okay, motion's made and seconded to adopt the minutes of the February 2nd, 2026 regular meeting as they were presented. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item that is always on our agenda is citizens' participation, but that would be anything that does not have the opportunity to go to public hearing.
Yep. So,
If somebody's here to speak on actually the other,
yep. So this would be the time.
on the Route 12 project or anything,
Yeah.
this would be a chance to speak, to address that.
90 Putnam Pike. So anyone that has any comments related to 90 Putnam Pike,
Or any other thing that is
or
not.
anything else that is on the agenda that is not currently subject to a public hearing, is welcome to go up to the podium. We ask that you just give your name and address, and try to focus on the wetlands regulations as much as possible. Thank you.
Let's see, okay. Al Dufresne,
No.
148
Because
Pond
no.
Road, Dayville, Last Green
Yeah.
Valley, Quiet Corner. Yeah, I have some comments to mention about Putnam Pike. That's the part of that area, the headwaters to the Dayville Brook starts back in the back there. It might not start directly on 90 Putnam Pike, but it starts in the woods back there, kind of goes into the ground, and it flows in behind the property behind Aldi's, and it goes into a concrete pipe, and then it flows under the road over under Route 12 and goes kind of into the aquifer recharge area, Hopkins Field. It's a pipe on a private man's property back there where the water goes, and it's kind of clogged up with leaves right now, and I believe some of the water from the distribution center if it goes in, might go back there into that recharge area and then continue on down there. I think Jonathan, I'm not sure, is going to do a site walk over there again, right, once the snow clears out, right, with Mr. Redgate. But I know that some other people might want to go on it and check that out. But it's not actually on the property of the, it's on the property behind the Aldi's back there where the old cinema was. So the water goes in there. Also, another thing I wanted to mention about the water drainage, part of the, it looks like on the map, part of the parking area for the distribution center that's more westerly on that property, it looks like it might be covering this huge ditch that's there. If you see it on a LiDAR map, there's some of it entered into private, public comment. On the LiDAR map, it's pretty visible what you can see. I believe it's a natural formation. It's hard to see because the woods are there, but it's a huge ditch, and it drains down to the St. Vincent property there, where that house is, the lone house there, and it goes under their yard with a drainage easement for the state of Connecticut. Then it goes into the catch basins that are there, and it goes partially across that property where the house is. And it's, I don't know if that's addressed, if it's a wetland, if it's a hydric soils there or not. That I don't know. But just letting you know that that's there. So, okay, that's about it.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Anyone else for?
Good evening, Claudette Rogers. I have something to say about the
Could we also have your address too?
294 Putnam Pike.
Yep.
I have something to say about the 90 Putnam Pike. I was with the wetlands that go from there down towards like Owen Bell Park. So in between there is another set of wetlands, and how the water runs through there, in I'm just very concerned with how this is going to affect the aquifer through there. That the wetlands that we have out there are our filter for our wetlands, and with having the forever chemicals being shown up in the wells close to that area, I know that the latest is that they're showing up all the way to Sales Ave, which is a mile from that area. That this site isn't going to be able to tap into city sewer, that is going to have to put all their sewer and all their dirty trucks and, all this stuff is going to go right into the wetlands up there, all the way down to Owen Bell Park, all the way down to our aquifer that we all drink out of, that our kids drink out of, that the trees and our everything drinks out of. And the driveway for there that they are proposing, with the town garage being where it is, and all the traffic that goes through there on a daily basis, I really think it is it's not a good idea. But in already that our town garage, the Killingly Town Garage, all of our fire stations, KB ambulance, everybody else fuels up with diesel fuel, and then we got 2 other gas stations right on top of our aquifer, like already in this town. And then we're gonna go put a warehouse on our wetlands that clean like all the gunk that we're already doing. And I thought this was new age corruption stuff happening, but come to find out, like obviously, not corruption, but just when you know better, you want to do better. I know that I know better, and I still have Teflon pans in my household. I shouldn't be eating out of Teflon pans. We know better. We know they cause cancer. We know that forever chemicals cause cancer, and we know they're already here in Killingly, right here in Killingly. They're right there. And we're going to have a 7-Eleven, like a mile from this, and we're going to add some more to it. I just think with them not being able to tap into city sewer, that it's a really bad idea. And that we're, you know, taking away from, we're killing an ecosystem that we don't even know how much damage, and we're just letting it happen. We're not taking over O'Killenly Pond. We're just letting them drain it and let these wetlands that were around there drain up these filters, the kidneys, if, you know, we think of Killingley as like a mother of a, you know, we're like killing her insides. We're just gonna, and then for our children, my grandchildren, I drive bus for 18 years. All of Killingley are my kids. So think about that before we let something like this go into our wetlands.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Ida Barris, 1123 North Road. I think all of you have been given this nice little picture. Yes, you all have this? And it just shows you the flow of water and the importance of the water coming in. And you've got start at Old Killingley Pond State Park, which is currently at a very low level because the Wish Corporation has decided to drain that. And all of these waters go through. You can see how they go right to the Hopkins well field, serving between 8,000 and 12,000 local residents clean water. And I just have a question, and I don't necessarily think it's for all of you, but for anybody in the town or anybody on the town council or anybody else. I have not heard anybody think this is a good idea. I mean, we have all of this is even a larger group than we had for the last town council meeting and the last planning and zoning. And I've not heard one person, one resident, come up and say, yay, this is a great idea. I don't think we want it. And there's the pollution, if there's trucks. But the other thing is we don't even know what's going in on Route 12. We don't know what that's going to be. So as was mentioned in one of the last meetings, you have to plan for the worst case scenario in terms of pollution, in terms of truck traffic, in terms of safety for the citizens. But if you're going to have all that, it is going to get into the water system. And this beautiful flow of water, as just mentioned, is not going to be safe anymore. And again, between 8,000 and 12,000 local residents get their clean water from this system. So I don't know who it's benefiting, but I know for sure that I've not heard one comment, maybe there'll be some today, that say, yay, let's do this. So I say, nay, let's not. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Anyone else that has citizens comment for anything that's not part of the public hearing who might have joined by WebEx?
I believe that anyone online, we were going to have them submit written comments.
Okay.
And make sure,
Excuse me, I
yes.
just have one question. Is it okay if I stand up for something that's going on with drying companies, or is that not on the
So that will be under the public hearing later.
later?
Yep.
Yep, that's a public
I'm
hearing.
just making sure, Sandy.
Yep, that's a public hearing.
All right.
Yes.
So
We don't want anyone, that's why we'll try to get going for that.
as far as other documentation that was received regarding something that's not subject to a public hearing, 90 Putnam Pike, we received written comments. There's copies with
Yes.
every one of the members. They're available for public review on our town website under citizens comment. We received 8 comments, all of which either ask questions or are generally against the project, citing concerns with stormwater and aquifer.
And those are all available, so don't think that anything's being kept from you. It's right, is it easy to find on the website? Make
Easy
sure
to
they know
find
how
on
to
the
find it.
website, and if for some reason anybody wants a copy of them, I'm happy to get a copy out to you guys, either digitally or hard copy, as soon as tomorrow.
All right. We're gonna go right on then at this point. We'll move right on to the public hearing. We could have the applicants start your presentation, and as I said, we will hold off even our own comments, gather them all up, get back at you with those, and then open it up to the public. What's that? It's the only one I see it on. Jonathan, is that gonna show up over there too?
Yeah, somebody is asking about the water moratorium and how it's going to affect water usage and business. I'm gonna leave that to the applicant to do the presentation.
Let them,
and
because
then-
there's gonna be a ton of questions.
And then we will open back up to comments, so.
Yep.
We'll get to your comments, at that point.
Oh, is it gonna show on that screen is what we were curious, because that'll help a lot of the people too.
Let me make sure it gets shared. 1 second.
And is it showing out in that area?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So your presentation is gonna be there. People at home are gonna be able to see it. So the people at home can see the WebEx, it's just we can't see the WebEx at the same time, but the presentation will be playing at the same time for them as well.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everything's out there for everyone. Don't have questions later.
Yep, so I'm gonna keep it. One second. Okay. Should be good.
All right. Madam Chair, are we ready to go?
I think we are.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Tom Cody. I'm an attorney at the firm of Robinson and Cole. Our office is located in Hartford, Connecticut. And I am here on behalf of the applicant for the wetland permit application before you this evening. And the applicant is Ryan Companies, U.S. Ryan is a nationally recognized developer with considerable experience in the warehouse and distribution center sector. The project manager from Ryan for this project is Director of Real Estate, Dustin Curran, who's with us this evening. Just a little bit of background on the application before we get into the sort of the meat of the presentation. Winstanley Enterprises is a New England-based commercial real estate developer. They've been actively sort of doing preparatory work and groundwork for this project for several years now. And among other things, they've assembled the various property owners that make up the land with this project. There's 25 different properties that are being assembled for this application. Winstanley's helped to assemble all of that. They've also coordinated a lot of field work, including wetland and watercourse delineation work, survey, title, geotechnical, utilities, et cetera, et cetera. So they've been very actively involved, and Ted DeSantos is a senior vice president with Winstanley. He's here this evening. He's been actively working on the project. Now, all of the preparatory work that Winstanley did led to Ryan Companies coming on board and to assemble the professional team that's really put these application materials together. So in addition to the wetland permit that you're reviewing, Ryan has also submitted a site plan application to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And as Chairman Eggers mentioned at the top, the Planning and Zoning Commission will have its own meetings, and they will address all of the issues that are associated with the site plan application. The property is located in the Business Park Zoning District, and warehouses and distribution centers are a permitted use with site plan approval. Similarly, the applicant has also submitted an application to the Office of the State Traffic Administration, which we know by the acronym OSTA. And the OSTA application is required because the property has direct frontage on a state highway, and therefore the traffic review is within their jurisdiction. So they will be looking at very carefully the application that's been submitted to them relative to the project. As I said, many professionals have worked on preparing the materials. The two that have probably done the most work relative to the wetland permit application includes Dean Gustafson, sitting to my left. Dean is a professional wetland scientist with All Points Technology, and he will be leading off the presentation momentarily. And then Langen Engineering has also been actively involved, and Tim Underko, a professional engineer, will present to you details about the project itself. So our presentation this evening is going to consist of three parts. First, Dean Gustafson will explain the wetland resources that are located on the project site. Second, Tim Underko will describe for you the site project design, get into building and access, drive, parking locations, stormwater management, and the erosion and sediment controls that have been designed for the project. And then finally, Dean will return to the podium and present his analysis of how the project design avoids direct and indirect impacts to wetlands as much as possible. And Dean will also describe the comprehensive wetland mitigation package that has been proposed with this application. So with that, what I would like to do is submit for the record resumes for Mr. Underko and Mr. Gustafson describing all of their professional experience and qualifications. We have a PowerPoint presentation, as you know, which is teed up on our screen. And I will introduce Dean Gustafson here.
Thank you, Tom. So we'll start with kind of just the orientation of the project site.
Actually, Dean, you had mentioned your name and all, but could we have your address and your name just for the record?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dean Gustafson. I'm a senior wetland scientist, professional soil scientist with All Points Technology, Waterford, Connecticut. You're welcome. So this first slide shows orientation of the project site. The project site consists of multiple parcels that total approximately 340 acres. And on this particular graphic, page left is north, oriented north. The project site is highlighted by a dark dashed blue line. Within that area on the eastern side is an area highlighted with an orange line, and that represents a conservation easement. We'll go into further conversations with that later in the presentation. And then the area to the east is the Markover Hunting Preserve that's highlighted in a bold yellow dashed line. 395 has frontage along the project site. To the west, to the south is Westcott Road and Stern Street. So that's the general layout of the actual project site. So for this slide, what we're showing is all of the delineated wetland resources that have been identified on the project site. They are identified in a green shading and so labeled. Within those areas, there are various stream systems, intermittent perennial stream systems that are identified by a bold blue line. And I know at this scale it's difficult to see all the details, but within some of the embedded wetland areas, there's also blue kind of crosshash shading that shows some of the vernal pool habitats. So as you see from this graphic, wetlands occupy a majority of the western and eastern extents of the site, with isolated wetlands scattered, particularly within the central portion of the subject property. In total, 24 different wetland systems were identified on the site and delineated, and those also included 13 isolated wetland systems, 10 stream systems that include headwaters to Mashantuck Brook, Davis Brook, and Falls Brook, and then 6 vernal pools that were confirmed through surveys during the height of the spring vernal pool breeding season. Several of these resources, particularly in the southern extent of the project site, as you front along Westcott, were historically altered by former agricultural land use and developments that currently exist along that frontage. This slide kind of starts to talk about some of the distinctions between the various wetland resources and include a variety of wetland functions and values that were formally assessed based on their landscape position, substrate, hydrology, vegetation, and history of disturbance and size of those wetland features. The highest functioning wetland resources are associated with headwaters to Mashantuck Brook, which are identified as Wetland 8 and Wetland 9. And that is in kind of the southeastern portion of the site. Davis Brook, which is identified by Wetlands 10 and 23, and Vernal Pool 1, which is centrally located in the site along the western side of the property, fronting along 395. And then Fall Brook, which is located in the south/southeast portion of the site and is identified by Wetlands 13 and Vernal Pool 4. Some of the vernal pool systems, particularly along the frontage of Westcott and the south extent of the site in the southwest corner, are classified as anthropogenic or affected by man-made activities. And those are identified as vernal pools 2, which is located on the east side of an existing farm road crossing, and vernal pool 3, which is a man-made depression, which is located on the west side of that existing agricultural drive. The highest, as I mentioned, the highest functioning wetland systems, mainly because they're associated with perennial stream systems and very highly productive vernal pools, are located in the southeastern portion of the site and identified as wetlands 8, 9, and 13.
Do you have a pointer to show us? Right. Thank you.
What do you plan on doing with all the wildlife?
We're gonna hold off on everything until the presentation's concluded, then we'll have the commission. We'll hold off on everything until the presentation's complete, and then we as a commission will have a few questions, and then we'll turn it over to 3 minutes, and it will have to pertain to wetlands issues. But thank you, guys. We just wanted to try to catch everything tonight.
Abby, if you can just show with your cursor. Yep. So this area where the cursor is located at is associated with Mashtuck Brook. That's wetlands 8 and 9. That system flows off-site into the kind of southeastern corner of the site. And then just to the southwest of that is a large wetland system, wetland 13, and embedded within that is a very large vernal pool system that we identify as vernal pool 4. So that kind of quadrant of the site has some of the highest quality wetland systems, and then to kind of centrally located on the site and along the western side of the property, fronting along 395, is another area where there's very productive wetland systems of the vernal pool habitat, and that's the headwaters to Davis Brook. So that provides a summary of kind of the wetland resources, some of the highest functioning wetland systems through a formal function and value assessment. And then with that, I'll hand over to Tim Underker from Langen to talk about the proposed development.
Tim Underko, professional engineer with Langen, office at 555 Long Wharf Drive in New Haven. Up on the screen we have a rendering of the site plan for the distribution and warehouse center. The white box in the middle is the proposed building. North is to our left on this plan. Thank you, Abby. On the north and east sides of the building, yep, that is the east side, that is trailer parking, as well as on the north side. And on the west side is the employee and associate parking area. The site connects to Westcott Road via 2 driveways, yep. One at a existing intersection, and then a new signalized intersection right where the cursor is there. And those driveways are the only access points into the property. So no access from other roadways. Access to the site is only via Westcott. Can you go to the next slide, Abby? So Dean gave a brief overview of this slide when it was up previously. We've overlaid the building, parking areas, and the driveways in yellow into the middle here, and wanted to point out kind of how the parcels interact with each other and what this looks like. So as Dean mentioned before, blue is the main parcel for the development. The yellow outline to the north and east is the Markover Hunting Preserve. That land will be deeded to the town of Killingly and conveyed for conservation and open space, and the hunting preserve will cease activity on that land. With that conveyance, there is about 99 acres of land on that property that is actively mowed, trimmed, and cut for the hunting activities. That clearing would stop, and that land that you see on the eastern side of the site would begin to restore itself after the clearing operations stop. So the preserve is 216 total acres that go along with that conveyance. We've got some distances called out to various surrounding roadways. Hard to see at this scale, but we are 2,941 feet from the building to Cook Hill Road. We are 1,081 feet from the building to 395, and we are 2,685 feet from Westcott Road. So we have centrally located this as best as possible, pulling it away from residential neighbors and finding ourselves in a position on site to minimize direct and indirect wetland impact. So this site orientation came through time and effort in working with Dean's office to select that position. The other box that I'll talk about is the orange outline, and Dean will get into that a little bit further, but that is another 76 acres of the main parcel that would be placed into conservation, and that covers the highest quality wetlands and vernal pools that Dean discussed previously. Hard to see again at this scale, but there are a number of dashed lines around the wetlands and vernal pools that exist on site. Per the Killingly wetland regulations, you have a 25-foot no disturb, so that is the nearest dash line to the wetlands. You then have a 75-foot buffer for main building uses, and then you have a 200-foot regulated area beyond that. With the location of the building, we avoid impacts to all of those buffers on the wetlands that exist between the building and 395, the wetlands that exist north of the building, and the wetlands that exist east of the site on the Markover Preserve land. So again, adjusting footprint, grading. We are using retaining walls on the east and west side to minimize our disturbance and make up for change in elevation that happens across the site. So our limit of disturbance is reflected on this plan as a dashed line. Our engineered drawings show the elevations of those walls and location, but in using those walls, we don't have to create slopes that chase grade as it runs away, helping us to minimize site disturbance and clearing. Let's see. The other important part to the site layout, proximate to wetlands, occurs in the details as you head south along the entrance driveways to Westcott. The application proposes 4 clear span bridges to avoid all temporary and permanent impacts to the wetlands and watercourses that exist along the driveway on the connection to Westcott. One of those crossings today is a piped culvert. We're going to leave that undisturbed, clear span construction over that. As you head into the site, we have a couple of existing farm roads that are too narrow to accommodate the new driveway width. So clear span bridges are also proposed so that no additional disturbance of wetlands that had happened as part of the farming operation occurs. So again, Dean may give you some more. He's got a slide that talks about the clear span bridges, but I thought it was important to note that as you head south on the driveway, no direct impact and no temporary impact to the wetlands and watercourses as they traverse the site heading to Westcott Road. Abby, next slide. In addition to the site layout and the grading, a big part of our application is our stormwater management approach. We have a 355-page stormwater management report that we submitted, and the first step that we do in preparing that and designing our improvements is we look at how does water drain from the site today, and in the existing condition, we identified 5 discrete points of analysis, and they're shown here in color. Watershed A is on the eastern side. That is the only bit of this parcel and development area that flows to the east into Mashantucket Brook. All of the other areas, the watershed B, C, D, and E, all drain to 395 and to the existing culvert system that the state installed as part of the 395 construction. From Westcott Road to the far northern terminus of our site, there's about 15 culverts that cross and convey stormwater from 395 itself, as well as other properties in the area. So with our analysis, we looked for kind of the most substantial crossing areas. There are some swales and channels that have been built, and tried to kind of key in on key points that allowed us to analyze what's happening in the existing condition, and then when we move forward with a new design, make sure that we can mimic those conditions in terms of peak flow and quantity of water that lives in those watersheds and moves in any specific direction. So if you go to the next slide, we've now overlaid our site improvements with the watershed map. And if you looked quickly, you saw the blue, the orange, and the yellow all shapeshift a little bit, but generally remain the same in terms of scale and direction that they flow. So watershed A still continues to flow to the east. We changed the shape a little bit with our improvements. And as part of our stormwater management and analysis, we take that shape shifting, the change to the surface, and design a system to manage that flow. So sometimes this slide is helpful for folks to understand kind of how water breaks on the site. It is not uniform, and on a property like this, especially with historic uses, things have been diverted and moved around. 395 was built. Various culvert systems were installed. We like to use this figure to help show that even post-development, we're maintaining the same distribution of flow and kind of honoring the way that the water flows before we show up with the development. So again, kind of diving into the details of our engineered plans, we have a number of stormwater management improvements to accommodate those changes to the watersheds. We treat both quantity, so the rate at which water moves, and quality in terms of cleaning and polishing the water prior to discharge. And we do that through what we typically call a treatment train, where you have a number of steps along the way. The first stop on a drainage system on site is the catch basins. We specified deep sump catch basins, which have a 4-foot pit essentially below the outlet pipe, which allows sand, heavier material to be captured as soon as possible in the system. Those are then cleaned like catch basins on a city street or in a typical parking lot. Usually that depth is 2 feet. We've gone to 4 feet to provide extra storage. From those inlets and from the roof, water is conveyed through a pipe network, which is the light blue lines, and then it enters hydrodynamic separators. You may have heard of them referred to as Vortec units, various brand names. It takes stormwater runoff and actually spins it in a cyclone, What that does is it allows any material that floats, like oil or a Dunkin' Donuts cup, to rise to the top, and it allows solids and settleable material to actually fall out of the bottom and stay in the unit as the water swirls around. So it's a first line of defense in pulling things that float and heavy material. Historically, that was kind of it in terms of stormwater management. In 2024, the state issued new stormwater quality manual and kind of changed the approach that development projects like this and the standards that they have to meet. So after our hydrodynamic separator, we go to the pink boxes that you see. We've got one on the east side, one on the south side, two on the west side, and one on the north side. These are concrete chambers that allow the water to come in and then allows us to meter it out at a slower rate. That allows us to handle the roof as well as the pavement areas and make sure that we're getting back to a flow rate that matches the site prior to development. So those are boxes that, again, kind of slow down the rate of water. As the water leaves those systems, it then enters a media filter system. The brand name that we have shown on here is called Jellyfish, and they are a filter unit that takes the stormwater leaving the detention system and actually runs it through a membrane filter prior to discharging it. The water is discharged around the main building to 4 different locations. Abby, if you could start on the start on the west side, that's great. So we have 2 locations, one there, one there. We have a discharge on the north side there, and then we have a discharge on the east side. And those locations are not arbitrary. As we got into this design and worked with Dean's office, they actually field located specific spots with a GPS unit that they thought were most appropriate for the discharge from our system. So Dean and his office looked at the topography, looked at existing preferential paths for flow, and we worked with his office to design the overflow that happens there and lock in on a specific location so that we can make sure we continue to feed these wetland resources that exist around the property. So we didn't just punch out of the parking lot and put a pipe. We worked with Dean's office to strategically locate those. And those are not just a pipe in the woods. They are a level spreader system in where the pipe leaving the detention systems and leaving the filters travels underground and is buried in a large section of perforated pipe. It has 2 above ground drains. The perforated pipe fills, and then the water rises up through the drains. As it rises through the drains, we have about a 75-foot long section of concrete curb that provides a level spreader that helps to minimize the depth of the water and slow its velocity so that downstream of these outlets, we're making sure that we're not causing erosion or transporting sediment. And at that point, that water has passed through the hydrodynamic separator, it has been through the detention system, and has then passed through the media system. It then was moved underground to the level spreader where it has the ability to infiltrate. If it doesn't infiltrate, it rises out the grates and overflows. All of our calculations are operating under the assumption that we have no infiltration. That is not the reality of soil, but to make sure that our system is sized conservatively and we're making sure that the improvements are to the highest standard, we are not taking credit for that infiltration. If you take credit for infiltration, you can typically shrink the systems, make them smaller. So we like to start on the conservative end, operating under the assumption that we won't have infiltration. This site does have fairly tight soils. If you've been on the property, there are exposed outcrops and rock. Rock elevation varies. So historically, the amount of infiltration that happens on the property is likely not significant, but we didn't want to take credit for that happening with the design of our systems. As you move down the driveways, to Westcott Road. We have two more hydrodynamic separators prior to discharge to a dry extended detention basin, which is along the eastern driveway in green. And then we have a biofiltration basin on the western driveway right there under the cursor. The difference in nomenclature is just a function of state standards. As contributing areas get bigger or smaller, the state changes what you can call them. But both of those are essentially rain garden type features. They're planted. They use biological uptake and treatment through the plants that exist in them prior to discharging. They also provide some detention, and they slow the water as it comes off the driveway, treat it, and then allow it to be discharged to the on-site wetlands, again, coordinated with Dean's office in terms of where they're located and how they discharge. If you go to the next slide, this is some pictures of what I was talking about. Our first stop at the top in blue, deep sump catch basins. The upper left image is the hydrodynamic separator. The pipe with the orange arrow is where water enters. It enters the chamber. It is spun. Things that float go to the top. Things that are heavy go to the bottom. It then moves out the pipe with the green arrow. From that system, it then goes into the image on the upper right-hand side, and those are concrete arch chambers, and they provide the detention that allows us to slow the water as it comes off the pavement prior to our discharge. And again, we have 5 of those located around the building. The photo in the lower left is one of the filter units. So the concrete box that you see is what these sit in. They have a system that directs the water into the bottom of the unit, and water actually enters the filters and then percolates up. Those filter media are in that kind of middle image there. They are a membrane filter like you might have if you had a whole house water filter. They are reusable and can be cleaned. So this shows someone pulling them out for maintenance. They can be hosed down and put back into the system. They typically last between 3 and 5 years, depending on how much usage they get, but they are inspected more frequently to try and get an understanding of the load and when they need to be replaced. But if you search jellyfish media, you can see some videos on folks. They can clean them with a garden hose and drop them back in to the chamber access through a manhole or a lid. The image in the lower right-hand side is the level spreader. So this is the last line in our stormwater management train. Water would be coming, say, down the hill from the left. You see a catch basin grate in the foreground. That is where our solid pipe enters. And then heading into the page would be a buried perforated pipe. I believe we have 48-inch diameter specified on the plans, large diameter pipe wrapped in stone, and then above that you have the riprap that the cursor is moving on. That area behind or to the left of the curb would fill, and then water would pass over the curb at a shallow depth, at a slow velocity, allowing it to be discharged out of our project limits and past the limit of our disturbance. Next slide, Abby. The other big part of an application like this is our soil erosion and sediment control plans. And I like to talk a little bit about the process and kind of what happens with those plans. So we prepared phase drawings that are in the set. We try and identify kind of 3 major steps in the project. The first would be, what do you do the first day you show up in terms of perimeter controls and sediment basins? The site doesn't remain that way forever. At some point, you've started building retaining walls. You may have started foundations. So we like to show an intermediate step of how do you work around those improvements and still provide protection to the wetlands and watercourses. And then the third phase looks at, okay, the building is up. Maybe the initial coat of pavement is down. Maybe not all the landscaping is in. So we would be in a new phase of work that requires different treatment You now have new catch basins that didn't exist before. What do you do to protect those? You may have an underground detention system that's installed. You want to protect that from construction sediment. So our plans include a three-phased approach to that. Those plans will be reviewed by your third-party peer reviewer, and any comments they may have, we would certainly incorporate them. We spent quite a bit of time on the drawings, but if there's a better way, we would certainly be open to that. After their review is complete, prior to construction, there are still a number of steps that have to happen on the soil erosion and sediment control plan. One, because of our scale, we're required to submit a general permit application to Connecticut Deep, so the site would be registered with them. As part of that application and registration with Deep, we would need to retain our own third-party consultant who was not involved in the design of the project. They would then do an independent review of the materials that were prepared by us and reviewed by your consultant. That third-party peer reviewer has to go into the state website and notify the state that they've completed an independent review and sign off on the measures proposed. And only after that are you eligible to receive your permit to cover the site during construction from a soil erosion and sediment control standpoint. Even after that permit is issued, there are reporting requirements. Every week, we have to be on site to inspect the perimeter controls, any of the soil erosion and sediment control measures that are in place, and prepare a report. If you go to the next slide, generally it looks like this. On the left-hand side is kind of the narrative of what we saw. We might identify kind of key activities that are happening on site. And then below that, we would list actions that may need to be taken. Sometimes a silt fence was knocked over. Sometimes a silt fence was ripped. Maybe the tracking pad at the entry to the site is clogged with sediment. All of those items are flagged and noted for action by the contractor in our report. And then with that would be accompanying photos that shows our findings and the areas that require action. Commonly, conditions or staff requirements desire us to submit these to the town as well. So your wetland agent could be copied on these to just generally be aware of site activity and any issues that might arise. And this work is completed with Dean and his staff, who aren't the ones that prepared the soil erosion and sediment control plan, but are responsible for the protection of the wetlands and watercourses. So we're usually hand in glove working with them. If there is an issue and it needs to be remedied, we may have Dean and his staff on site, or they may see something that we didn't, and we collaborate to make sure that during the process that there's honest accounting every week, and if there is an issue, it's rectified as fast as possible. Good. And I'm going to turn it back to Dean. Yeah.
So this graphic shows a story of what the actual regulated activities are that are part of the permit application before this commission. Just for quick orientation, the wetland areas are identified by a tan shading, outlined in green line type. The surrounding blue shaded areas represent the 200-foot upland review area. And within some of those wetland features, you'll see a salmon or pink coloration. Those represent the vernal pools, 6 vernal pools located within some of the wetland resource areas. And then finally, the actual the regulated activities within the upland review area are identified by a purple shading, and those are mainly concentrated in the frontage of the road of the two driveways associated with access out to Westcott. And then finally, within the building footprint, you'll note that there are 4 green shaded isolated wetland systems with their accompanying 200-foot upland review area. So as you've already heard during our presentation, the proposed development has been designed to the extent possible to avoid resource impacts to the greatest degree possible, while also minimizing encroachment into the 200-foot upland review area. We intentionally worked with Tim and his civil group to try to situate the building in the best possible location to avoid, first, minimize any wetland impacts, but with a focus on minimizing impacts to the highest function and value resources on this project site. The 4 isolated wetlands are very seasonal depressions within the landscape. They do not support vernal pool habitat. They contain seasonally saturated soils, typically within the early spring season, and then dry out. And if you were walking through these areas during the height of summer, you may not notice a distinction between the surrounding upland areas. They're very ephemeral wetland systems. And as such, based on those hydraulic conditions, landscape position, and their vegetative structure, they don't support wetland function values in a significant capacity. Probably their best function is, seasonal recharge of groundwater, and those functions will be replaced by the underground detention systems that will promote infiltration. So we are losing, technically 22,400 approximately 400 square feet of wetland resources associated with those 4 isolated wetlands, but we're replacing the lost function with the comprehensive stormwater management system. As you've also heard during our presentation, various engineering controls have been incorporated into the project design as a means of further minimizing resource impacts. Those consist of extensive areas of retaining walls to limit the spread of fill and graded slopes, and particularly in locations where the building is somewhat proximate to sensitive resource areas. Those limit, in a large degree, any encroachment into the upland review area and avoid direct wetland impacts. In addition, and we'll go into a little bit further discussion when we get to that slide, but we're also incorporating 4 large span bridge structures that were incorporated into the 2 driveway designs, and that will avoid any direct temporary or permanent impacts to those wetland resources and some of the surrounding wetland systems. Considerable effort has been made to incorporate those span structures, and they do a great job of avoiding impacts to those wetland resource areas. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 4 different bridge crossing structures. We'll just take them in order. So bridge crossing number 1 is located along an existing farm road crossing. There's an existing culvert that conveys intermittent stream flows from the wetland system to the east, conveys it into a channelized intermittent stream course channel into the culvert, and then the outfall of the culvert falls into a incised and rock armored man-made channel that kind of flows further to the south and to the west. That structure will avoid any of those resource impacts and also provide a large opening to allow for any possible overflows of that culvert, as well as allow for any aquatic organism movements through that kind of man-made stream channel system. As we go further up the driveway, we have a second bridge crossing. That area doesn't currently contain jurisdictional wetlands. There's an existing farm road that kind of moves into the wooded area of the site, and historically filled in wetlands, and this looks like it happened probably in the 1930s or 40s. That wetland system connected across. There's no conveyance flows between those systems, but we are providing a bridge structure to avoid any temporary or permanent impacts to the adjacent wetland systems, and also allow for any conveyance of any wildlife that may be kind of utilizing that location in between those wetland areas. Back to the western driveway, we have Bridge Crossing 3. That's an area that's currently behind an existing residence. That's an extension of that same incised, channelized, and rock-armored stream channel. It's a fairly narrow feature, but we're employing another large span bridge structure to avoid any kind of temporary or permanent impacts. And then finally, Bridge Crossing 4. That location of the wetland system has been historically disturbed. It looks like through agricultural activities. There's been some channelization within that kind of narrow wetland corridor. There's two very seasonal intermittent stream systems that flow through that area that have just been dug in parallel. And that bridge structure spans that entire wetland system in those man-made intermittent stream channel systems. So that's a fairly considerable effort of the project to implement those bridge structures. We'll get into some of the conversation on future slides, but this is a good one to start talking about, some of the measures that we've employed with those bridge structures to avoid any incidental impact to herpetofauna, reptiles, amphibians that may be utilizing some of the adjacent wetland areas and vernal pool systems. We'll be employing permanent isolation barriers, a product called Animex. It's a polyethylene fence permanently installed in association with these bridge structures. They'll essentially be wing walls that'll kind of funnel any wildlife that may be utilizing these areas. We don't anticipate any significant wildlife corridors in association with the two driveways. You have quite a bit of development disturbance along Westcott, and you also have Interstate 395 that have already kind of segmented off any historical wildlife movements. But to the degree that we can avoid any incidental impacts to wildlife, we employed those measures, and also some of the more sensitive areas, we extend the Animex or the permanent isolation fencing into the further up and down the driveway, and also around some of the stormwater management features so that they don't become decoy vernal pool habitats that may result in some incidental impact to some of the herpetofauna population. The cross section here kind of shows kind of the clear span. One thing to note is that many of these wetland areas are fairly narrow, so and the stream systems are fairly narrow, so we're providing at least a 40-foot clear span. We're talking about a resource that's maybe 15, 20 feet wide. In some places it's narrower, sometimes it's a little bit wider, but we're providing a clear span of those jurisdictional limits and some adjacent bordering areas to protect those resources long-term as part of this. Next slide, please. As part of the avoidance and minimization analysis for the proposed development, we went through a fairly extensive and at least month-long iterative design process to minimize the project's wetland impacts to the greatest degree possible. That results in the preferred alternative plan that is before this commission, which we deem as the most prudent and feasible. You'll note that with the three alternatives that were considered, there's been a significant reduction in wetland and upland review area impacts that was realized by employing this iterative design process. And we've resulted we've resulted in a reduction 2 to 4 times some of the alternative plans with the preferred alternative plan. Next slide, please. So we've gone through, talked about the resource activities, regulated activities. We talked about avoidance and minimization methods. And so the last step in kind of your wetland impact analysis is to provide mitigation for unavoidable resource impacts. So we'll start talking about what the project is incorporating into its design to achieve those goals and provide appropriate level of mitigation. What we have on this graphic, this is the entrance to access driveways to the proposed project off of Westcott, kind of on the right-hand side of the graphic. And then what we're showing and also for reference, we're providing some of the bridge crossing locations. And we'll start on the eastern access drive on the east area. We're showing a couple areas that are shaded in red that are wetland restoration areas. So these areas have been historically impacted, directly impacted by fill material through agricultural activities, through development of the residents and buildings along Westcott, and various other activities. We're talking about historic fill that's been in place probably at least 50, 60 years. What we would do, we've done some fill analysis in those locations. Generally, there's 1 to 2 feet of fill material overlying some mineral wetland soils. There's still a presence of native wetland topsoil underneath those fill material areas. So the plan would be to remove that historic fill, expose and restore the wetland topsoil, and then provide a robust planting with native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous material to restore them as functioning wetland areas. Adjacent to those wetland restoration areas is a blue shaded area where we know it as a wetland buffer enhancement. We're looking at removing all of the existing structures within those areas and restoring those areas so that to be suitable for a planting bed to plant, again, native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous material to enhance the function of those buffer zones, those upland review areas, in support of the wetland restoration areas, which are in support of the adjacent wetland and vernal pool systems. So as far as the wetland restoration area, we're looking at almost 4/10 of an acre restoring, and then for the wetland buffer enhancement, we're looking at a little over 2 acres of habitat restoration. The third area that we're showing on this graphic is this green shaded area that's on the left side of the graphic. And that's an existing cool season hay field that's being currently managed as for hay production by the property owner. It has typical, non-native and mix of native cool season grasses and forbs that are mowed a couple of times a season for hay production. We'll be allowing that area to naturally attenuate, and we'll be enhancing that area by incorporating native forbs and flowering plants as part of providing that area for pollinator habitat for a variety of insects, butterflies, and other species that prefer pollinator habitat. The majority of that area is also located within the 200-foot upland review area, so it's also an additional buffer zone habitat enhancement of a little over 2 acres. So these kind of represent the direct replacement for the wetland impacts that are unavoidable as associated with the building footprint. Next slide, please. Here, just kind of give you a sense on what some of these habitats, the progression it goes through from restoration, planting, and then established habitats. These are from projects that we've worked on in Connecticut. They include a couple of photographs from a project in Madison. The two top photographs, the bottom left one is from a project that was restored about 10 to 12 years ago in Brookfield, and then the bottom right is a pollinator field enhancement area as part of a wetland mitigation project in the town of West Hartford. So this just kind of shows you a general progression of what can happen with these wetland restoration efforts and upland review area efforts that restore degraded habitats and restore them to high functioning valuable habitats that provide a benefit to not only the project but also to the town of Killingly's wetland resource areas. Next slide, please. The other component, and this is a very significant component of our overall mitigation plan, is incorporating extensive conservation areas. You've already heard through Tim's discussion of some of the conservation areas that's being incorporated as part of this project. The cross-hashed, kind of red cross-hatched area in the eastern part of the site provides a significant area that will be preserved in perpetuity. It incorporates the highest functioning wetland systems, 8, 9, 13, and within 13 is an extremely large embedded or what's considered encrypted wetland vernal pool habitat. Those are both, combined, those are also headwater systems to Mashantuck Brook and to Fall Brook, is associated with wetland 13. And it also includes some of the highest quality terrestrial forested upland habitat on the subject property. We're looking at a significant area incorporated by that portion of the project site. It's a little over 76 acres in total, but it contains a larger value than just the acreage itself because of those high quality resources. Along the eastern and kind of northeastern side of the project site, the Markover Hunting Preserve will be converted to a large open space conveyed to the town of Killingly, approximately 216 acres. That also includes portions of the headwater to Mashantuck Brook, as well as other wetland resources and open pond areas adjacent upland review area that will provide a significant benefit to protection of those resource areas as part of enjoyment for citizens of the town of Killingly. And as Tim had mentioned, the current hunting operation will cease to exist. So those kind of indirect disturbances to wildlife and whatnot, as part of that operation, will cease to exist, and those areas will start to naturally attenuate and revert to more native habitats with less active disturbance. So there are secondary benefits as part of that large open space property. Next slide. I mentioned some of these elements, but these are worth mentioning again. They really are part of the overall mitigation strategy for the site. We're employing extensive areas of wildlife exclusion fencing to avoid wildlife interactions with the proposed project. Avoid those interactions. A lot around the actual facility, there's extensive areas of retaining walls that are impenetrable by wildlife. So incorporating the Animex permanent wildlife fencing with those measures will avoid a lot of possible interactions with some of the wildlife utilizing the property. We've also incorporated Cape Cod style curbing in the two driveways, and that's just as an additional measure. If some wildlife does get around the fence, the exclusion fencing, they aren't trapped within the actual road profile. They have an ability to escape the road without significant effort using that low profile curbing. And then finally, we have, for some of the detention basins associated with the driveways, those stormwater management areas, those are important to incorporate into the design to ensure that we're providing appropriate level of stormwater treatment before it reaches the wetland resource areas. But there is, in areas where we have temporary pooling of water, there's a potential that those areas could be used by herpetofauna, vernal pool, amphibians, as breeding habitat. So we've employed the Animex fencing around those areas to avoid that conflict and impacts to those populations. Tim had also briefly mentioned during the stormwater monitoring and erosion control monitoring phase of the project that we're also incorporating a resource protection plan for this project. And what that entails is it's driven by one of our wetland compliance monitors who employs various techniques during construction of the facility to make sure there's attention given to the sensitivity of the resource areas within the project area, make sure the protection measures are being installed properly, maintained properly. And we start that with a pre-construction site meeting with the full civil contract team. We'll give them a training session, show them, what areas they need to be aware of, where they need to maintain sensitivity, what possible wildlife they may encounter, what to do if those encounters happen, essentially contact our office. We can give them instructions on how to properly handle the wildlife, or we'll come on site and do it ourselves. We've maintained that protection plan throughout the duration of the construction project, and that provides an additional level, essentially belts and suspenders level of protection to the wetland resources throughout the duration of the construction project. And as Tim had mentioned, we dovetail those efforts closely with his Langen staff who are doing the erosion control monitoring. So as a comprehensive team, we're maintaining those control measures and avoiding any incidental impacts during construction. We've employed this technique on probably 50 plus projects throughout my 38-year career in Connecticut to great success. It provides a measure of attentiveness by the contractor that they probably don't normally have when they know that someone's looking over their shoulder on a regular basis to make sure that things are being maintained properly. And we keep in very close contact with the overall site supervisor who's running the construction project. For the wetland restoration and upland review area enhancement areas, the mitigation elements, we do on-site monitoring during construction of those facilities by a wetland scientist, and to ensure that they're being implemented properly in accordance with your conditions of approval and as per the wetland mitigation plan details that are provided in the plan set that you have before you. And then we also have a post-construction monitoring period to ensure that the plan to improve the habitats of those areas is actually brought to fruition through a 5-year post-construction monitoring period where we'll go out during the growing season, check the health of the plants, make sure that the wetland restoration, buffer restoration areas are functioning properly, and then provide annual reports that we can submit to your commission, your agent, to show that we're hitting the various performance standards that we'd set up in our design guidelines. And then finally, as Tim had mentioned, the erosion sedimentation controls are, go through a third-party review process, and they're also, go through a regular monitoring, at least a weekly monitoring period and reporting requirement to Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So per your commission's policy for wetland mitigation requirements, you have a 1-to-1 mitigation ratio. So we have an actual wetland restoration area of 16,921 square feet. Through the Army Corps' New England District's wetland mitigation guidance document, you're also allowed to take some credit for areas of wetlands that you're protecting in perpetuity. So with the conservation area on the subject property where we're conserving wetlands 8, 9, and 13, we have a total area of preserved wetlands of over 307,000 square feet. Through the Corps' guidance document, we're allowed to take a 1 to 20 value for the ratio value for that, so that results in 15,260 square feet of mitigation. So for a total mitigation area of 32,281. I mean, when you compare that to the proposed direct wetland impacts of 22,446 square feet, you end up with a mitigation ratio of 1.44 to 1, which exceeds the 1-to-1 ratio per the town's policy. As I've already mentioned, we have additional mitigation elements as part of that that do not get brought into that equation, but we have a significant amount of other mitigation elements that are being provided as part of the site that if you were able to come up with some type of ratio, it would far exceed that 1.44 to 1. Next slide. So, finally get to the summary. So as I mentioned, the project avoids direct wetland impacts to the highest function and value wetland systems on the subject property. We've used a variety of engineering controls for avoidance and minimization of resource impacts as required by wetland impact analysis requirements. And the project only has direct impacts to the low functioning isolated wetlands, which are identified as 16, 17, 18, and 25. We've also minimized encroachment into the 200-foot upland review area to the greatest degree possible through some of those engineering controls. And the project avoids encroachment into the 25-foot non-disturbed buffer. That accepts for the 4 large span structures that are located immediately adjacent to resource areas. The comprehensive mitigation plan meets the town's requirements for mitigation, and then in addition to that, we're providing an additional 292 acres of conservation land that includes the highest quality wetland, vernal pool, and aquatic resources to the benefit of the town. So, based on all of that, the project will not have a likely adverse impact to wetland resources. And the preferred alternative is considered the most prudent and feasible alternative. So we look forward to the Commission's positive review of the project. That's the conclusion of our presentation. We thank you for your time. And I will hand the floor back over to Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, but actually, before we get going, I noticed that several people were trying to take pictures. I want to make sure this PowerPoint presentation should be available on the town's website. Am I correct? If not, I'm sure it could be.
So all the
should be.
materials are present. This presentation we can upload tomorrow morning to the town website, so that way everyone can see what was presented here tonight. Hard copies can also be made available in the town's planning and development office for anyone who wishes to get one, or they could reach out to me directly through the town website via email. My name is Jonathan Blake. I'm the zoning officer and planner for the town.
But if it's there in one place, it's much easier for you people to look at it, study it at your convenience, and see what it is that you're looking for. All right, we're going to have some of our commission members make some comments first, just so we can keep going. Actually, I'm sure you started with some notes already. I saw you writing away, Rodney. Then we'll get to everybody.
So excuse me, I'm just curious at this point, has there been a pre-application hearing set up with DEEP to discuss the general permit?
Yes, so Tim Underko with Langen. One thing I didn't mention during my part of the presentation is we're proposing an on-site septic system that's outside all of the buffer areas. But the system would exceed the local health department's approval threshold. So Once you're over 7,500 gallons per day, you get kicked to a state permit. We had a pre-application call with both the call it septic division, as well as Chris Stone from the Stormwater Management Group last Wednesday or Thursday. So we've worked with Chris on a number of projects of this scale, and they don't typically require pre-application on the stormwater front, but they do on the septic front. So we've started that dialogue.
Okay. I deal with Chris Stone all the time, so. I typically do a meeting with the Stormwater Division just to get their initial feedback. And, you know, I would highly suggest going through that process with Chris, because he will provide constructive feedback.
Yeah, he was, again, to Monturco, he was quite helpful last week, just as a first time seeing it, so thank you.
Right, because this evening, we will just, I'm sure that we'll be leaving the public hearing open, because we have to have review from our engineering firm that's going to be working with us and a lot of other things. And as we said, last month I thought spring would come, and I was certainly wrong, but hopefully we'll be able to get out there. And if there is a site walk and we're able to get out there, it will be posted. But do you want to explain a little bit, Jonathan? Because there will not be an opportunity out there for give and take. At that point, we will be walked through the different areas, and since this has been a public hearing, you can't have a lot of little chats going everywhere or no good comes of it. So you want to explain the process a little bit,
Yeah.
Jonathan?
So if we look to do a public hearing, it's going to be a special meeting. We're going to pay attention to the weather and the snow melt and try to get a time, hopefully by the end of the month, where we can open that up to the public. There'll be also a site walk that will be conducted by a third-party reviewer and the applicant's expert witnesses, so that way they can go through the totality of the site, particularly focusing on the wetlands impacts. But the third-party reviewer is also going to be touring the site as they're providing third-party review for all applications to the town for planning and zoning as well. So when we do a site walk, and we will go over this when we schedule one, when we do a site walk, it's limited comment. We'll record it with audio, but especially if we have a larger group, we're just focusing on the design, and then we end up coming back to the next regular meeting, which will be in April. In general, we would be asking to keep the public comment open. Our third-party design or review team is going to provide a presentation and comment back to the commission, and we'll be here in person. I think at least one of the members might be here today, who's going to be going through that through Tie and Bond.
Okay, did any of our people have some more comments for them or questions for them before we get going? Paul?
Of course I do.
I'm sure you did. Inquiring minds.
Just a couple quick ones. When?
Paul, Mike.
Paul, yes, we usually have them on.
Sorry. What time of year were the wetlands delineated? Was it throughout the whole season? Was it spring, summer, fall? Was it summer?
Dean Gustafson. So the wetlands were delineated over a course of 3 or 4 years at various times of the year. That was done by another consultant called AECOM, and their documentation is included in our wetland delineation report. We field reviewed all the wetlands in the fall of 2024.
Okay, so you personally did not delineate the wetlands, or your company?
So we reviewed all the delineated wetland boundaries on the subject property, and verified that they were substantially correct with minor kind of changes. So we've been able to field review all the delineation, essentially adopted it as in-field so that we can testify to it.
Okay.
And actually, Paul, it's probably a good point you're bringing up about the delineation in general. We have so many people here this evening that may not be accustomed to the normal wetlands regulations. I think it's important that we let you guys know that Connecticut has very specific regulations that cover just what a wetlands is. And in Connecticut, it's designated by soil type. A lot of you it's different in Massachusetts. Plant life comes into play, and I believe in Rhode Island as well, Rainey?
Yeah, we do plant hydrology.
Yeah, and see, in Connecticut, it is soil type. So it's a different type of thing that's happening here than what you may be thinking of. You may just see a wet area. If that soil type does not meet the classifications, it is what it is. It's very clear. Actually, Jonathan, once again, you probably explain things clearer.
Yeah, it's outlined in our regulations. I would defer to the soil scientist in regards to going into more detail. But our wetlands regulations are very clear of what is a regulated area and what is a regulated upland review area. Our review is just on the wetlands and wetlands impacts. Planning and zoning, when they meet later this month, they're going to be receiving this application, so they will have a future meeting where they go into it a little bit more detail, and they're going to be looking at the totality of our zoning regulations. But this is just for our wetlands regulations.
Okay, and I'm sure everyone here, we're going to be waiting to see the review of basically your calculations. That's the most important thing. Is there anything else?
Absolutely.
I should have known.
Another question, that I didn't see anything in here, or I didn't see any even talked about, 100-year flood zone. I mean, how many hundreds of acres? Is there a 100-year flood zone on this property, or we don't?
No, there is no map floodplain on the property.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and sorry to
Oh, no, go.
interrupt. If you look through our wetland assessment report, we have a section in there that discusses floodplain, and we make note of the same conclusion, that there are no mapped floodplains on the subject property.
Next question I have, if you go to this, can you go to that slide that you showed us? That's the one. Kind of intriguing. What is the dark circle?
That's Vernal Pool 3. That's, yeah. I marked that
And
one.
the next question I had is the buildings, you got the lime green over there. Is that building going to stay next to the road? Is that building going to come down?
So I'm going to answer both your questions. So that circular feature is a man-made feature in the landscape. It was constructed prior to 1934. It existed. We're not sure of the historical context on what the function of that feature was. It certainly wasn't intended to create wetlands. It wasn't intended to create vernal pool habitat. But it is purely an excavated pit.
Can I interject?
I'm going to interject because I do know a little bit about the history of it. I believe, and I'm going from memory here, I believe the date was around 1870. It was going to be the first, essentially, reservoir for downtown. So there were a number, and again, from memory, the Killingly Water Department or Killingly Water Company had constructed a number of pits and reservoirs to provide downtown with water, and this was one of the initial reservoirs dug. I don't know if the history isn't clear if it was ever actually used for the purpose, but in some of the research we've done, historical documents identify that served as one of the initial reservoirs to feed downtown.
Thank you. It's pretty interesting
It
to
is.
find some of that stuff.
Yeah. Now, so is the building going to go?
Yes, yeah, all the structures.
So
existing
all the structures along the road there too are going to go also?
That's correct.
Okay. And one last question. Everybody knows what's going on outside today. What are your plans here for snow removal? Where are you going to put the snow? How are you going to handle it?
Our site plans actually identify a number of areas surrounding the paved areas to accommodate snow storage. So that was a thing that came up with staff early on in our process. I don't have a specific slide. We can come back next time and show you the areas. But if you look through our full engineered set, there are a number of areas identified as snow storage. I know off the top of my head, the southern side of the building, there's a fairly wide open lawn area. That was a major area for storage. And then I believe on the northern end, we identified an area as well. So we do have that in the set, and we can come back and talk about it.
Paul, you all set?
Yes.
You thought of something else?
Well, I'm just going
You've
through
got
the pages
notes.
of my
Yep.
notes, yeah.
I had started writing some notes, and then the next page had the answers to them when we were going through them.
I am curious, and I'm familiar with the Army Corps guidance and regulations regarding the conservation wetlands, right? The conservation areas, and having those wetlands protected. But I am curious why you chose to go that route rather than replicating the wetlands one-to-one.
So it's a great question. So the site geology makes it challenging to kind of create additional new wetland areas. Now, there may be some additional opportunities around the frontage of Westcott that we can explore, but certainly within the interior of the site, what you do is a trade-off. You're removing high-value terrestrial forested habitat to create wetlands. If you look at the Army Corps' guidance document, they really frown upon doing that as part of mitigation. So we can certainly look at additional opportunities in areas that have been historically disturbed to see if we can't expand those wetland creation areas to use that to satisfy the 1-to-1 ratio. So I can make that promise to you.
Okay. The other question, it's related to Army Corps. Has this gone through a jurisdictional review?
Another great question. We are in the midst of an approved jurisdictional determination with the Corps of Engineers. So it's been submitted. There's been an analyst assigned to it, but that's the process we're in. We're probably a couple of months before we get a final determination based on the workload that the Corps is dealing with.
Unfortunately, yeah. I know the situation, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, and I had a lot of questions regarding the maintenance of the entire system, but I'm assuming that a lot of this is going to be reviewed by the consultants that we've hired, and it makes more sense to wait, or is there an answer at this point?
I mean, you're welcome to ask the applicant while they're here. I mean, there is some maintenance language in the stormwater
That's what I'm
report
thinking. It's
that
gotta
speaks
be.
to the maintenance.
We haven't gone through the whole
Third-party
thing.
reviewer is going to provide us comment on everything, including the comments. They are watching the meeting. We have a total of 23 written comments, 2 of which are letters of support, 16 in opposition, and 5 that just outline overall questions and concerns
Yep.
about the review process. So all of those are public record. They've been entered into the record and will be submitted for the review as well.
Karina, anything?
I do have a question. There's been a lot of talk about the wetlands and the restoration of them and trying to mitigate the impact to them. I may have missed it somewhere, but is there anything planned, forecasted, whatever, for invasive species control measures? Because you're going to be...
dealt with them.
I've dealt with this. Because you're going to be clearing wetlands, you're going to be restoring wetlands, but there's going to be a whole bunch of development, construction, destruction, whatever you want to call it, going on. And, I mean, I'm very familiar with going through a certain area, tracking stuff, and it spreads like wildfire. So what's being planned for that?
So another great question. I didn't get into it when we were talking about the wetland enhancement restoration areas, but incorporated into that, which all the details are provided in the project plan set within those specific sheets. We do have invasive species control measures incorporated as part of that, because within those enhancement areas, there certainly are invasive species within the understory. Particularly all your typical woody invasive shrubs. Once you get past the existing hayfield and start moving into the forested uplands and wetland systems within the interior of the site, you get away from some of that historic agricultural disturbance, and you're getting to areas that have been maintained as forest. They've been actively maintained with logging operations and whatnot. But those areas are generally void of invasive species. Doesn't mean that there aren't a couple here or there, but they're not certainly as widespread as the frontage of the site, where we do have active controls proposed for those areas.
Okay, and just kind of a follow-on question to that, because thinking of treating or mitigating invasive species, generally there's a lot of chemicals involved with that. If this is a distribution center with a large volume of vehicles that are heading up there, what is being planned in terms of industrial pollutants and combating the negative effects of that on the restored wetlands and other environment?
So I think the train of your question probably makes more sense to talk about it from a stormwater management perspective. And Tim can go into a little bit further detail and kind of jump on what he discussed earlier through those slides. But the comprehensive stormwater management system has a lot of elements in the treatment train that properly treat and capture some of the pollutants and constituents that would be associated with typical vehicle traffic coming into the site. You have various filter media. You have large underground detention system with interaction with the kind of gravel media that's below it, and then you're even at the very end of your discharge. You have an additional infiltration capacity, but at that point you're not dealing with any suspended solids that would kind of impact some of the receiving wetlands and stream systems. So I don't know, Tim, if you want to go into a little bit more detail.
Yep, no, I agree with all that, and it's not just a one thing. It's that whole line of things that act together to provide that protection and that treatment. And the other thing too that is maybe unique to a project like this is that from the level spreader, so the bottom right-hand image, we are hundreds of feet from that point to the wetlands and watercourses around the perimeter of the building pad area. So after you have all of that, you still have the natural overland flow through the leaf litter, through the soil, through the topsoil, around the trees. That still happens and provides the treatment that happens to rainfall naturally. So we are not a pipe from the parking lot and a pipe that dumps into the wetlands. We've got all of these things happening along the way, and then our system ends and you have hundreds of feet of undisturbed woods before you actually get to one of the resources. So we think stacking all of those things on top of each other provides that protection that you're looking for.
And I think it's one of my biggest concerns going back there was the maintenance of that whole system, because that's where we tend to have the breakdown in things. You guys can design anything. I mean, you can.
Yep.
But somebody has to make sure it continues to work, or it does no one any good. So I think that's the other thing. We're going to just want to make sure that that language is very, very clear, and it's a very, very clear maintenance plan and such when the review is done. Chris, anything?
Commissioner Archer already asked my questions. I'm going to wait for the third party, but I do have one concern about snow storage. You're going to need oil water separators. I'd like to see information on all that because you're going to have diesel trucks in there, and we know all diesel trucks leak, and that snow's going to contaminate, and it's going to be stored, and it's going to leach into a wetlands. But I want to see a detailed plan of that if possible. Thank you.
Wait, we'll let you rest a minute. He has to go again.
I got a question. Maybe Jonathan can help me out a little bit. I know, and it's probably not a wetlands question, but the setbacks from Markover to what they are now, because Markover was a hunting preserve, so I know the separation distance expanded, for a building and all that. Does that just go away because Markover says we're selling, or does it have to go someplace else?
Yeah, I mean, on review of the zoning, it's a zoning regulation. So there was an increased requirement for setback related to the truck parking and the building related to a game farm or a hunting preserve. Because that is being extinguished, that requirement would not be required as proposed. Because they are proposing to remove that and have entered into an agreement with that property owner.
Thank you.
Rainey? Then he'll think again.
I have
Are you?
one is a logistics question that, again, I'm a wetland biologist, so the moving of trucks, not my bailiwick, but has the potential wetland impacts, have you weighed, is there any potential of maybe instead of 4 bridges across 2 roads and these multiple crossings, one wider road with only 2 crossings, maybe from that more, I think this would be westerly entrance, or, I mean, either entrance really, because then you're not having 2 roads surrounding 2 wetland complexes crossing 4 times instead of twice. Has that been explored at all?
We have, and
Okay.
we went with this option for 2 reasons. One, operationally, you like to separate cars and trucks wherever possible. That's the main driver. The driveway to the east is meant to take truck traffic directly to the truck area. The driveway closest to the 395 ramps is for employees. They could drive on that road without interacting with a truck, passing a truck passing them. And Abby, if you could move the cursor, we've talked about 4 bridges related to wetlands. We actually have a 5th bridge on the plan, and that is for a crossing movement there, where there is a second exit, not typically used, but it exists in case it's needed. And we didn't want to have trucks and cars interact there, so we put another bridge to grade separate them. The other thing we run into with a single driveway is just emergency access concern. If something were to happen on a driveway, you want to make sure that you have a second route there. They do interconnect about a third of the way in, so there is ability to cross over if needed for emergency vehicles, or if someone found themselves on the truck driveway and recognized it, or if a truck found itself on the passenger car driveway, we could remedy that. So we did think about it. We did keep these driveways as narrow as possible. Building bridges carries a significant cost premium. You want them to be as narrow as physically possible. So we tried to keep the width just to what's necessary for the vehicles to pass each other, and then the span to kind of a typical standard dimension that still allows us to be clear of the wetland resource or the watercourse or the stream crossing. So we did evaluate all that during this process.
Okay, Rodney, you had another question?
I do.
Okay, got
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought that was
well,
it.
follow up to bridges, just real
Oh.
quick, because I saw the 40-foot span across the wetlands, mostly these streams or these narrow wetland corridors. I had a question about, because the detail doesn't mention the height of the bridge from the wetland surface for mostly wildlife passage or anything like that.
Yeah, it was, I think we noted it on one of Dean's slide. Nothing is flat out there, so the clearance changes, but we're holding a 2-foot minimum clear span to the lowest horizontal member to ground. So there will be a full set of construction documents eventually that go with the bridges, but for planning purposes, we've worked with the bridge designer and Dean and ourselves, and a 2-foot is our minimum dimension that we're holding, and we're adjusting grade to get up and over. Many of the bridges will have a pitch like you see there, because there's really not a lot of flat topography down in this area as you enter the site.
So to expand on the bridge questions, I guess, we typically like to see clearance over the 100-year storm for bridges. Has that been looked at for these bridges?
No, but we can.
Okay, we like to see a foot above the 100-year.
Yeah.
It's a buffer.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head, with a 40-foot span, no problem, but we'll do the analysis.
I'm just
Sure.
letting you know
Yep.
that's what we typically
Sounds
ask
good.
for, so.
Yep.
And the other question goes to the underground detention system. I reviewed the drainage calculations, and I didn't see any infiltration taking credit for. So I am curious as to why the open bottom concrete tanks.
Because we'll actually line the perimeter of the system with an impermeable liner, so it's just less concrete that you
Just
have
less.
to. Yeah.
Okay.
again, we showed, I believe we used Retain It as a placeholder.
Yeah.
There are a number of pre-manufactured units. Some of them are Ts, some of them have solid bottoms. I think Storm Trap may put the concrete at the bottom and the feet up. So the Retain It system doesn't have a solid bottom for our purposes. We can get some extra storage in that stone below, and then we've got the liner membrane. I think it's filter fabric liner and filter fabric to create a sandwich to protect the liner.
Is this going to be in groundwater?
The systems along the western side will be in fill. So there's somewhere through the middle of the building, there's a transition from cut to fill. The systems on the east side will actually be socketed into rock, I guess below groundwater if there were any.
Right, yeah.
But we do take consideration to make sure we're not creating a bathtub that can't drain. So one of the drivers of the location of the pipe that heads to the east there was we had to clear our cut section as we transitioned to fill and make sure we could actually get the inverts out. So that location was really driven by the design of the system. Even the placement of that system, we wanted to get it as far out from the rock cut as possible, and then worked with Dean's office on, okay, we need to generally be here, and then they field located. You can actually see the contours really spread out in that area where we're positioning the outfall, so worked with Dean to locate it.
Yeah, my concern was, sort of this bathtub effect that you
Yeah,
have.
and we tried to mitigate that by pushing that system as far south, would certainly pay attention to that detail. But that outlet is a way for us to get below the cut and then get to a point where grade is actually dropped off enough as you head to the east to get a pipe out.
Get it out.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, anything else? Yes, Raymond.
One last question.
not a problem.
And it's
Then we-
perfect that it's on this slide. So about halfway up from the access to the building itself, I can see that there are some stormwater conveyance pipes that just then go, westerly down that slope and outlet right there. Is there any treatment for that which is collecting like on that sloped drive before just being discharged into the forest?
Abby, is that just that is a pure crossing, right?
The offsite.
So what that pipe is conveying any water that may accumulate on the east side of the driveways. We wanted to have a conduit, yes. So that is not taking any water from site improvements. It's just providing a passage.
Place to move it?
Place to move it. If there are no wetlands there, that doesn't mean that flow doesn't move through that area. We just wanted to make sure that we had an outlet. And we weren't redirecting water to, say, a different watershed or to that the wetland. We wanted to continue that flow path.
Is there inlet and outlet protection associated with that?
Yes, inlet and outlet protection, but no treatment as
No
it's
treatment.
just flow from the woods to the east.
Okay, anything else from our people? Because I'd like to, I'm sure everyone wants to get a chance to speak. But as I said, try to keep it 3 minutes or less. And it does have to pertain to the wetlands issues. We have very clear regulations on what our things are. And if it's something quick that they can answer, we'll have it. Otherwise, there will be third-party review, and we'll go from there. So if anyone wants to speak, just make sure you give us your name and address for the record. Hi there.
Adele Robinson, 32 Mockingbird Drive. And I noticed when they were showing their many slides, you mentioned the distance from the building to Cook Hill, to Mazentuck, and to Westcott Road, but you totally avoided the northern side to my street of Mockingbird Drive, where is Briarwood Falls, and there's about 90 of us different housing over there. And you didn't mention what's the distance from the building to that group? And then I have a couple issues about, I'm with you, all my things I had here, I love it, you brought it up, I had about the invasive species.
Yep, we try to,
Not just in the land, but you've got how many trucks? I mean, where are these trucks coming from? Are they coming from California, Texas, Florida? What's on them? And they're gonna be bringing this, they're gonna be bringing road salt. Where is all that road salt going? And how is that going to affect the wetlands if all this salt is going down into the water? And you mentioned a septic system. Are you having leaching fields, and where is that water going into the wetlands?
Okay, I'm sure, not speaking for them, but a lot of that will go through the stormwater system, and all of your plans with that get reviewed. But do you guys happen to have the numbers on the distance from this project, Jonathan, or one of them guys?
Going north
For
to Briarwood
Briarwood?
Falls. You showed it
Could,
in one of
could
the
we
other
aggregate them
slides.
all and then we can
Yep.
try, yeah. Not gonna try and
That makes more sense.
Yeah, you
wing
can
it.
see it in the north, way over, you can see all the houses,
Oh, yeah.
right? A little bit further, there you go.
We can measure that and get a number.
Perfect. All right.
Ballpark,
Thank you.
3,000 feet,
Okay,
top of my head, but we'll get a real number.
yeah, yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Step right up. I know it. Just like getting sandwich meat at Big Y.
Steve Hedges from 583 Cook Hill Road. Does this new building have, like, town water supply?
Okay, they'll keep track of all these questions for you guys.
Is it? I'm just asking if it's, they get water from the town, or, because they're mentioning an outdoor
Are they bringing in,
septic spa.
are they bringing in town water
I
or
believe the
wells?
proposal has Connecticut, uses Connecticut water.
Well-
For water service. And
I have
then
a well.
Private septic.
I have a well. I don't have town water. So all this runoff, I got pheasants from the farm constantly, so I'm close to this. And my concern is our well. Is it gonna get contaminated? I've been there 34 years. I've never had a problem. We could now. I don't know. Water runoff. We have water already that comes right out of the ground in the spring between 583 Cook Hill Road and 595. And they widened the road in 2001. And they took like 2 feet from me, the entire 361 feet in front of the house. And they put a culvert on the southern side of the driveway. And I happened to be there one day, and they were working there, and they had the culverts in, and the road, it was stripped right out. And I said, we have a problem on the other side of the driveway because that's where all the water's coming from. And I think an engineer was there. One of the project managers was there, and he's looking at me like I got two heads. And I'm like, look, this is where it's coming from. Oh, no, 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 no. Okay. Well, the next day I came home from work, and there's a culvert there. I didn't know I had that much pull, but that's what happened. But I do know that many of the properties, just from looking at that picture once, they all got landlocked when they put Route 52 in the 60s, which is now called 395 for newbies, but that's what it is. They got landlocked, and most of the people that now own them, I don't know if they already sold them, but they received them in like family wills, trusts, and you know, they want their money. They're landlocked, they can't sell them, and I get it. But 3 warehouses less than 3 miles from our driveway? Yeah. You got 2 more going up on Route 12, right? Well, that's 3 warehouses.
See, that'd probably be P and Z.
And that's, okay.
Yeah, you know.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But I understand, you're
Yeah.
wetlands,
Yep.
and I get it, But that's a lot to stomach. And you can tell, I've known you a long time, I'm kind of vibrating over this. But I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm really worried about septic. everybody's septic, not only mine, but we don't have city water. We don't have gas. We're kind of self-contained, so we're kind of at the mercy. And that's very disturbing. Thank you.
Al Dufresne again, 148 Pond Road, Class 1 water distribution system, licensed, state of Connecticut, retired. My concern is losing headwaters to our aquifer. We have the Mashantuck Brook headwaters that start on the property. I wonder if they're going to get affected in any way by anything runoff. And also we have the Fallbrook headwaters that go to an aquifer for the Fallbrook Mobile Home Park, and that's an aquifer recharge area where it's unfiltered water that goes to a public water system, Mobile Home Park up on North Frontage Road. And that's my main concerns. And also these hydrodynamic separators, water separators, do they separate sodium chloride and calcium chloride and PFAS out of the water before they put it back into the culverts in the ground or distribute it back out into the wetlands? And is the temperature cool in the water, or is that going to affect the plant life that filters the water? And that's about it, just the water separators like the jellyfish and the contact hydrodynamic separator, if that filters out the calcium chloride and sodium chloride, PFAS, that type of thing.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ida Barris, 1123 North Road. I know this is inland wetlands, but what is going into this warehouse? Because I think that would make a difference for everything. So we don't know what's going in, and I think if we don't know what's going into the warehouse, if there's no specific purpose for it at this point in time, you kind of have to plan for the worst case scenario because we don't know what's going in. And that's a big concern. What's going to be there? Thank you.
I'm a little slow.
We all get slower by the day, Charlie.
Yes, and no one told me not to fall.
Oh, that's true. That's true,
it's-
too.
It's my wife's fault. I'm Charles Ferlin. I live at 86 Knox Avenue, Danielson, Connecticut. It's basically a stone throw over the mountain to the warehouse. Our happy salamander would have a little walk, but could get up to my house to escape this project. And I think first thing is that there's no requirement to disclose who's going to occupy the warehouse. In fact, it has little bearing on your decision. But, and there's a big but, and it goes to the wastewater management system. The third-party expert needs to know what is going to be in the warehouse, because if there's leakage, there could be significant damage to the wetlands and the water in the town of Killingly. And so that it should not be a problem to disclose that, so that the third-party expert could analyze it. And also, if the public, and I spent a lot of money the last time on Walmart. In fact, I outspent them in fighting them. If somebody in this room, or maybe Pam would let me do it, have our own analysis of the groundwater system that they have proposed there to see if it's actually adequate. But you can't do that without knowing all the particulars of what's going to happen there. And so that I urge you to, now it's going to be disclosed after your next meeting to the zoning board. At least that's what I was told, and it could happen, maybe it won't happen. But I think to be able to have the knowledge, the experts' information that you need to know that, because I keep on thinking of foam. And it wasn't too long ago when we looked at foam favorably when there was an airplane accident or if there were fires. Little did we know the dangers that were lurking in that foam. And so that it would be helpful, again, just to be on the safe side. My well is basically connected to the same system here, and I'd hate to find out that on the mountain it's a little hard to get water up there from the Connecticut Water Company. And so that it would create real problems. And so that for the safety of the community, it would be helpful to take just a little bit more effort. Now, just a couple more things, and so I'll sit down. First, that you asked about that circular pond, or that's the Stearns Reservoir, and it was the original reservoir for the borough of Danielson. And secondly, just so people know the extent size of this project, I looked at the state highway information. We're talking about 800 employees coming in every day. We're talking about 588 to 840 trucks every day. So the salt, the chemicals, and in my misspent youth, I've had a few cars that leaked a little antifreeze and a few other things. So that you're going to have that, and it would, again, check to see if it's actually going to, what they propose is sufficient. Remember, their duty is to come up with the least costly way to solve the problem. It's not that they're trying to not solve the problem, but sometimes the least costly way may not resolve the problem. And so I urge you to look at these information. I believe there'll be another time for public comment.
Yes.
Okay, because I would then.
I can't imagine us closing a hearing this evening. That's not happening.
Okay, because at that point there, if we have the information from the third-party expert too, or who knows, maybe Pam will let me bring in somebody. Then I would ask the board either to reject or accept the project, because I don't have enough information outside. I know that it will significantly change, and it's not your purview, but it will significantly change the town of Killingly forever, because we're talking about an additional 800 employees. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let's see if I don't trip here.
I'm Barbara Mosier. I live at 6 Mountain View Landing. No one has said anything about the noise. What kind of noise are we going to be getting?
That's
from
going to
this?
be, that's for you for P&Z.
I know, but still, we need to know. Especially if you're going to have like 800 trucks coming in every day.
Claudette Rogers, 294 Putnam Pike. I'll say like Al said, last Green Valley member, Quiet Corner, This is where we live, in the quiet corner. I wanted to ask about if they will be also looking into an amphibian and reptile consultant. I know we have the wetlands specialty, but to know what kind of, like, to not disturb them during mating season or stuff like that. I have been told that that's like a concern of disturbing the wetlands. But also with the storm water drainage systems, the jellyfish, they said that they pull out the things and they hose off the contaminants. So you pull out the filters and you hose them off. Where is it going? And I just find it to be very, very disturbing that they're not disclosing who's going in this. And a lot of water is being used and talked about. And Connecticut waters, yep. It's something. And the fact that these guys we have in the town right now, a hold on anybody hooking up to our city sewer. So when do we put the hold on putting garbage into our soil? Like the PFAS and all that stuff isn't enough. Like our soil is gonna be contaminated. We got 7-Eleven. We got, you're gonna put a warehouse here. You're gonna put a warehouse there. You're gonna, like, you can't do it. We can't do that. We can't stay the quiet corner. We can't, and then we're gonna give up our hunting preserve. Okay, you give up your hunting preserves, and just like they got rid of the wolf stuff out at Yellowstone, what are the deers gonna do? They're gonna eat stuff that isn't the invasives. They're gonna eat the sugar maples. They're gonna eat the stuff that they like to eat, and we're gonna be left with the invasives. You get rid of the predators, the hunters, and you get rid of, like, it's gonna be a great disturbance to our ecosystem here in Killingly. And I would love to stay, you know, if these guys did a great job, there's a lot of money invested into whatever's going into here. This isn't just your mom and pop shop setting up in our backyards. So, lot of money, a lot of stuff. But like I said, the whole town of Killingly are my kids, are my family, are my elders, are my future. I am part of the Quiet Corner, the Last Green Valley, Killingly Conservation, and I would like to keep it like, yeah, if they, as far as we know, they don't got nobody there yet. So if they can say they're gonna disclose who's gonna be there and it's gonna be a wildlife rehabilitation center, yay, we're here with you guys.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, Justin Fisher, 94 Dam Road, Dayville, Connecticut. We briefly touched on the Stern Reservoir. Historically speaking, that was a drinking water supply, so to my limited knowledge, that would be classified to a GAA. So did the applicant put in the special permitting required because that is an existing drinking water source? That's just my question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Samantha St. Ange. I live at 89 Gear Road. I'm going to try to keep what I had to say to 3 minutes. I think I heard a lot tonight, which I fully expected the term minimal impact to be used several times. I lost count. Minimal impact is not what I want to hear for my life, for my community, for my next generation of kids that are going to hopefully live here. I have a higher standard for my life. That's why we moved here. That's why we built our home here. My kids I see kids riding down that road, riding down Mashantuck with bikes and fishing poles on their back. I see people walking there daily. Maybe you haven't experienced this, and I'm sorry for you if you haven't, but where we live, I can open up the windows in spring and hear peep toads going crazy outside of my window. I smell fresh air, not exhaust. I don't have light pollution. I look out my window when I wake up in the morning and I see a beautiful valley in front of me with the hill. It is a wonderful place to live, and it is very scary about our water supply. We have a pond, a 3-acre pond in our backyard that is conserved through a I'm not sure how we had purchased the home from a different person, but that was already in place. We have herons, we have beavers that run down that valley. We have thousands of dragonflies, thousands and thousands. I don't even need to spray. I don't like to spray. We're very organic. I don't like to spray for bugs. The dragonflies are doing the work. The toads are doing the work. We have massive gardens. We have orchards on our property. This is so disturbing. Minimal impact, and I'm sure the commission understands this. Loss of habitat is the greatest impact to wildlife. And I want to refer to the commission's mission because I'm hearing a lot about regulations tonight and number crunching and footage and things that pertain specifically to a pigeonhole. The purpose of this commission, it says it right on your website, and I'm just going to quote a little bit of it here. By enforcing the preservation and protection of the wetlands and watercourses from random, unnecessary, undesirable, and unregulated uses, disturbance and destruction. I'm seeing a lot of focus on regulation. I'm not seeing any of these other issues being addressed tonight. It's very upsetting, and I'm sorry to get so upset. This is not just about criteria. It's about the spirit and the purpose of this criteria, why this commission is here. Mission statements do not contain random words. I've been on plenty of commissions and committees that we scrutinize the specific words that go into our purpose and mission statement. So those words aren't there for no reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kevin Olson, 699 Cook Hill Road. And if any of you folks have any of those... Just better? Yeah. Okay, good. If any of you folks have any pheasants in your yards, would you please return them? We missed them. Okay. Okay. Good evening, members of the commission. I'd just like to take a few minutes tonight to offer my thoughts on the Husky project off Westcott. As you may know, my brother and I own the property which the developers of the project are planning to deed to the town. My family has owned and maintained this property for generations, and for the last 50 years I have been the caretaker. When we were approached about the sale of the land, we were skeptical, but they indicated that most of the property would go to the town as open space. It didn't sound like the type of thing a developer would do, but it showed us that when Stanley and Ryan understood the importance of approaching this project with respect to the environment as well as neighboring property owners. And as a neighboring property owner, I am not going anywhere, and seeing this land developed in a thoughtful way is extremely important to my brother and I. I really do not think that any other developer would be as respectful to the environmental concerns of the area as these people have. Conveying 220 acres of some of the best mix of wetlands, woodlands, and open fields in the area to the town to remain as open space is truly remarkable. Thank you. Come on, little love.
Hi, my name is Sarah Clark, and I am originally from Connecticut, but I live in Haddonfield, New Jersey right now. And I am representing my family, which owns one of the properties that has been included in the project. My brother, sister, and I actually spent numerous weekends and vacations actually with my grandparents who lived on Peckham Lane, Emmett and Gertrude Clary. In fact, they raised their children here, and they all lived here for, until they became adults. The project site, as I understand it, is included in a business park zone, which is designed to focus commercial development in a particular designated location. And I understand that that's kind of been the intent of the town for a bit. Nevertheless, obviously, it's important for any project, whether the type or the zone, to give appropriate consideration for natural resources. And I actually commend the commission for actually what you're doing and having this public hearing and bringing as much information to light about the development of the project. So I wanted to just highlight a few things that I've heard tonight and actually have read prior to coming here this evening. First, I think the proposed plan shows a strong focus on preservation, which is unusual for a project of this type. Between the protection of wetland resources and the quality of that, as well as the providing of a buffer and conservation areas. I think that is actually very unusual and is welcome to see that as part of this project. Second, I think the mitigation plan appears to be well thought out, and it's emphasizing on environmental resources and the quality of the wetlands to be preserved. And third, again, though the project is included in a business park zone for development, I think the developer has actually got well thought out plan for conservation and preservation. Again, not something that I think we've seen typically in projects. I thank you for allowing us to come tonight, and again, thank you for having this type of public hearing for public to discuss all the facts.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Murphy. I live at 156 Mashantuck Road. It's pretty close to the proposed site for this distribution center. So I was pretty shocked to not really hear Mashantuck Road brought up at all in this presentation. I chose to purchase a home and raise my family in Killingly after renting in Danielson for nearly a decade. I've supported this town and grown to love its small town charm, which does not include huge distribution centers in my front yard. For many reasons, I am opposed to this project being approved. My priority, first and foremost, is always the safety and well-being of my family. I have 2 small children, and our home relies on a well for our water. Protection of the sources that water is tied to our health and our home. My main concern with this project is the wetland system, with all of its complexities, being disrupted and causing irreversible damage to the water sources that provide water to the homes in my neighborhood. In the summary of this presentation, it was quoted, "No likely significant impact to wetland resources." No likely significant impact to wetland resources. No likely, significant, like what are those words? Those are, that you take that with an opinion. It's your opinion, what is likely or significant. That's gonna vary differently to mine when it's in my front yard. Water is not replaceable. Once it's compromised, it's already too late. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jared Slota. I live on Gear Road in Killingly, Connecticut, and I live on the Emerald Necklace of Mashantuck Brook. For over 100 years, these lands were agricultural with sparse trees and slowly developed. Things had time to adapt. Yes, there were changes made in the space without consideration of wetlands and the free flow of water. You'll find ditches, culverts, or modifications made by the farmers from the past. Ever since then, this area has been slowly healing. What this proposal suggests is to flatten a very varied topography and modify watersheds of 3 distinct brooks. What is the healing period after this building is no longer financially viable and unoccupied? While the developers can take this project and go to the next one, we're the one living with generational repercussions. Wetlands are so sensitive that this committee controls 200 feet plus of any work that needs to be done by this space. This is a major disturbance to 3 brook headwaters, unknown amounts of wildlife habitat, migratory birds, and other unknown species. I submitted public comment number 21, and I do wish you take a look at it. Ryan Companies has a very lovely website which shows some of their past projects and portfolio, one of them being a similar 1.3 million square foot structure in Fayetteville, North Carolina, company I will leave unnamed. But do take a look at their website and take a look at a 1.3 million square foot building to see what that looks like in that entire space and the absolute chain of events that'll happen after this 5 to 8 year project starts to work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Murphy, 325 Breakneck Hill Road. I am against this Westcott Ave Husky project. It is far too loud, too large. It will drastically change the rural character of our community forever. This is from the Killingly Planning and Zoning. This is from the Killingly Plan of Conservation. Development should be accommodated within the appropriate zoning and existing neighborhoods and should be kept on an appropriate scale and designed to minimize impacts upon the existing neighborhoods. Also from the Plan of Conservation. Extensive water resources exist within the town of Killingly in the form of surface water, streams, lakes, and ponds, and groundwater. Protecting these water resources is the fundamental objective of this plan. Also, more than half of the total land area of the town is forest land. Minimizing fragmentation of natural areas and retaining open space and forest connectivity as Killingly grows will protect the environmental quality and character of Killingly. Trees are one of the most visible and dramatic positive contributors to Killingly's rural character and its economic well-being. In reading the Plan of Conservation and Development, it appears that the business park area off Westcott Road was designed as a prime area for manufacturing. That being said, the size and scope of manufacturing warehouses has drastically changed in the past 20 years. E-commerce, distribution, and fulfillment centers differ from traditional warehouses from a physical, operational, and economic standpoint. Some key factors are e-commerce facilities have larger footprints, while traditional warehouses are typically less than 100,000 square feet. E-commerce facilities range from 100,000 square feet to over 1 million feet. E-commerce warehouses tend to be taller. They have more loading docks, different siting locations. Traditional warehouses are typically situated close to other industry uses, whereas e-commerce facilities tend to be proposed near population centers. Typical hours of operation for e-commerce distribution centers span 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. More constant flow of goods. Anyway, so I just did this research and realized when we decided we were going to do this back in 1994 and designate this area for manufacturing, we were talking about an entire different size of warehouse. And so people are coming up to me, people are actually calling me, crying, and saying, how did we get here? And how we got here was our ordinances. So that's really where we need to go. How did distribution centers get into business park of such a large size? How did they get into general commercial of such a large size? I am a co-founder of a grassroots group called Keep Killingly Rural. On Friday, we will be submitting a formal application for an immediate moratorium stop order on all applications for and approval of new warehouse distribution centers with greater than 100,000 square feet of floor area, including in general commercial, business park, and mixed-use interchange district. The purpose of this, and I'll only do like 2 sentences, Sandy, on planning and zoning, so they know how the process works. The purpose of this moratorium is to allow the Planning and Zoning Commission time to pause, reassess, and revise its regulations in keeping with the goals of the town's Plan of Conservation and Development, the town's aquifer protection areas, and to fully address the town of Killingly's citizens concerned. I understand this is inland waters and wetlands. To clarify, it's too late. We can keep fighting the way we're fighting, but to change the ordinance, these 2 distribution centers on 90 Putnam Pike and off of Westcott, that's to be fought here. I can't fight that with the ordinances. Procedurally, the Planning and Zoning Commission will have the right to accept the request for a moratorium or refuse it. There will be a public hearing concerning the matter where the citizens can be heard again. For anyone in this room who is concerned about maintaining the rural nature of the community into the future, we would invite you to come to that hearing and speak your mind. We'll be advertising the date of the hearing once we have it. Feel free to look us up online. Keep Killingly Rural. Differences of opinion are fine. We're just trying to get the word out there so people understand what happened. Like, how did this get into our ordinances? I think that's it. I had one question on the...
A real wetlands question, Michelle?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I had a real wetlands question. Okay. So we have a ban on satellite sewers in rural. Is all of the septic going to be in Business Park? Like, not any of it can touch rural? So that's my question.
Hi, my name's Diana Pesci-Weber, and I live at 238 Mashantuck Road. Hello, members of the inland wetlands. Mashantuck Brook runs directly through my property. I have a pond and then an earthen dam and Mashantuck Brook. I submitted this comment regarding the proposed Project Husky development on Westcott Road. As a downstream property owner along Mashantuck Brook, I am concerned about the scale of the proposed development and the significant increase in impervious surface within this watershed. Project materials indicate that portions of the site discharge toward the Mashantuck Brook system. Any increase in stormwater volume, velocity, or pollutant load could directly affect the brook, its wetlands, and the properties along it, including mine. Mashantuck Brook supports wetlands, wildlife habitat, and downstream water resources, and increased runoff from large warehouse roofs and parking areas raises legitimate concerns regarding changes in peak flow and downstream erosion, sediment transport, destabilization of brook banks, chloride and salt loading from winter maintenance, pollutants associated with heavy truck traffic, thermal impacts from heated runoff surfaces. I respectfully request that the Commission carefully evaluate downstream impacts and require enforceable protective measures, including independent technical review of stormwater modeling, long-term water quality and flow monitoring, clear maintenance and accountability provisions, safeguards to prevent degradation of Mashantuck Brook and its wetlands. As someone who lives directly along this brook, I ask that the Commission err on the side of protecting our watercourses and wetlands. Once impacted, these systems are extremely difficult to restore. Thank you for your time and service to our community. Obviously, I'm very upset just about my quality of life and everything around me and everyone around me. But I know that you'll do what's right for our area, and hopefully it won't blow my dam out again. Because one thing that Husky did do is they didn't pursue the property along Mashantuck Road that does have issues at the moment. So anything added to that particular pond, I'm talking about Jeff Harriet's property, anything added to that pond then goes into man's, then comes to mine, and causes big problems. So I've heard them mention the cost of things a couple of times tonight, and I know that there would be work to do if they had acquired that property as well. So the fact that they chose not to, and it's part of the Mashantuck Brook and our water, it makes me think maybe they don't care as much as we'd like them to, you know, when you're looking at something like this. And the fact that it doesn't have a purpose other than for them to build it and then they're going to lease it to we don't know who. So they're really just building a property and then wait and see what happens. So, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mark Salisbury, 16 Irene Street. So without knowing exactly who's going to be in there, I think one of the larger considerations that I haven't heard spoken about is if this ends up being any sort of last mile delivery location, the amount of traffic is going to be significantly different than it would be if it was a standard delivery warehouse. That also is going to lead to a different mix of vehicles that are in there. And just from standard demographics, usually folks that are doing last mile deliveries are going to have vehicles that are in more likely a state of disrepair. They're going to cause more, leaks and have a more fluid leaking out of them onto the ground there at that facility. That's not going to be necessarily accounted for if we're talking about standard 18-wheelers. So I think that has a large impact on the surrounding area and the overall plan for it. And great too about the increased ratio from the wetlands instead of 1:1 to 1.4. That's fantastic. But the 1:1 is a requirement, folks. It's not something that we're striving for. So going not even 50% over that really it doesn't impress me personally. And I think considering the fact that in order to have it there, that it was a requirement, they're going to have to do some mitigation. It just doesn't speak to a particularly larger planning that is worrying more about the wetland displacement than it is the ability to put the building on the site, because that's the wetlands that are disturbing. Also too, just from a wildlife perspective, even though we have two large parcels that are being gifted, that isn't something where all the wildlife that is in the current location now, where they use the water or not, aren't just going to go into the non-occupied areas that have been gifted, and aren't going to be affected by the noise and light pollution that is going to drive them just completely out of the area, generally speaking. Those are my concerns. I look forward to the upcoming meetings for planning and zoning.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sandy, we do have, we'll turn to online next. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Anthony Palacia. I'm a longtime Killingly resident. I've got properties over on Westcott Road at the proposed entrance to this site. I would just like to say that this group has done a phenomenal job at putting together this plan. They've been on the property over a period of years. They've been out there with extensive crews and really put together something that I think, for something of this size, is very considerate. And it really shows to their dedication on minimalizing the effect on the surrounding area and to the wetlands. And I'd like to thank you guys for your presentation. It was very thorough and helpful in educating everyone. So I'd like to voice my support for the project, and that's it.
Thank you. And Jonathan, you said you had a couple of comments ready to go?
I have some written comments that were submitted on the
On the WebEx?
On the WebEx. Mariah Planter, she's curious about the water moratorium and how this is going to affect the water usage and how business of that side is going to be okay. A small business in Danielson, we are being scrutinized for our small water usage. Concetta Cotting wrote, where would the bridges be? What exact locations? She went on to ask, how will stormwater from heavy truck areas be treated to prevent oil, fuel, brake particulars, other contaminants from entering adjacent wetlands and headwater streams? Has downstream impact been modeled for 25, 50, and 100-year storm events? And how will neighboring residents' properties be protected from increased runoff? What upland buffer will remain intact around the productive vernal pools to protect amphibian migration corridors and wildlife habitat? How will lighting, noise, and 24-hour operations be evaluated for indirect impacts on the highest functioning wetlands and surrounding habitat? What enforcement mechanisms are in place if the conditions are violated? She's expressed some concern regarding the need for restoration of habitat and noise affecting amphibians and other living things in the wetlands. And speaking to those who are profiting for sale of their properties. We have other people that are online. There's a total of 21 participants that are online, so if you
And
want,
it's also on Facebook Live as well, isn't it?
it's on Facebook Live. The opportunity to applicants do have the ability to unmute if they want to participate in it. We just ask for one at a time.
Okay, so actually, that's the word out there, if anyone does want to come on. We'll give, does anyone else here want to speak before we? I would assume you're going to have a long list to have answers for next time. Now, did you think of anything else while we were waiting?
I did not. I did not either.
Well, there's a lot. There's a crazy lot, but the reality is it all needs to be, you've already gone through a lot of the
I
calculations.
have, yes.
Okay.
Actually, I do have one.
See.
So I did look at briefly look at the wetland assessment forms and everything like that. Is there a wildlife impact and assessment report? Is that something that was put together, or?
So in the wetland assessment report, we do discuss wildlife, but a separate wildlife habitat impact out of the context of the wetland application has not been provided. But we do address wildlife impacts within the context of wetland resource impacts.
Is that going to be something that's adequate?
Um,
Is that something we're going to want?
Yeah, I'm going to reserve.
Let you know now than later.
I'm going to reserve comment for the third-party review because we're relying on that expert testimony from the town's perspective. But I have been reading through the wetlands assessment and other documents for this meeting and planning zoning.
Now, has anyone shown some interest in hopping on from the WebEx link? Okay, in that case, as I said, we're definitely going to want to continue this. No question about that. Hopefully, there will be able to be a site walk before the next meeting as well. Although I am the fool that guaranteed that spring was going to come last time, and I've never been wrong before. What can I say? But hopefully we can get out there. I think it's very important that anyone knows that they are able to come out. There will not be an opportunity for a give and take or anything, but it is a good chance to see what's out there and, just put some perspective on where you're standing with what's being proposed, so you have a better feel for it. So at this point, do we have a motion to continue this public hearing with the how would we do this with the possibility of a site walk, Jonathan, just to make sure
So you as chair can set an agenda. So we can work and look to pay attention to the weather and see, as long as we have 48 hours notice, we're allowed to post an agenda, and I can look to share it, via
Okay.
Facebook like I did with the public hearing
Yeah,
notification.
we don't want anyone to think that we're trying to hide a site walk or something.
The third-party reviewer is going to be also looking at that and probably doing their own independent one for
Yep.
the totality of the property. The commission previously expressed an interest at looking at the entrances, in particular the crossings where the majority of the restoration and impacts are being proposed.
All right, do we have a motion to that effect?
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion is made and seconded that we will continue this public hearing with the possibility of a site walk that will be duly posted with at least 48 hours' notice, and definitely continue to the first Monday in April. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Motion carries. Why don't we take a quick, yes, let's take a quick break and then we'll start all over again.
Yep, so 5-minute recess.
Yes, 5-minute recess and we'll start all over.
Sandy, I'm on overtime now.
We're gonna pay you 3 times what we paid you for part 1.
Ronnie, you can't leave.
No.
Yeah. I need to get out of this hot room. That's what I need.
reset the Zoom or anything? Some of those, the WebEx, Zoom shuts off at a certain time. Does your WebEx?
We are on a premium service, so we are
premium?
still live and still
We
going.
are premium.
Yep.
Okay, let's reconvene this. Now we move on to the regular meeting of the Killingley and the Wetlands and Watercourse Commission. And our first item is unfinished business, application 25-1618 of Solely Engineering for construction of 2 new distribution centers totaling 476,250,000 more or less square feet with all of the amenities. All right, may as well turn it right to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is John Nuff. I'm an attorney with an office at 42 Cherry Street in Milford, Connecticut, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Killingley One LLC, which is the owner, not the contract purchaser, but the owner of the property at 90 Putnam Pike. Consists of 58 acres. We're in the general commercial zone. As you noted, that we are proposing two distribution center buildings, approximately 250 square feet. That's a special permit use in our zone. As you know, the application was received in December. There was some plan revisions because of planning and zoning issues. So this is really the first time we've been able to present the application in full to you. So with me this evening are Derek Redgate and Kevin Soley from Soley Engineering. They're both professional engineers. Tom Schutz is our wetland scientist. He's joining us virtually. And then also very recently I sent Jonathan some plans that were revised slightly in response to some comments that we received from planning and zoning. It changes nothing with regard to this application, but we wanted to make sure that our plans that you have are consistent with the plans that planning and zoning has. So simply like moving one building that's closest to the street further away from the one single family home, a new location for the driveway, where for the curb cut to give better sight lines. But again, the most important thing is it doesn't change in any way the regulated activities that we're discussing this evening. So I know that you have the 11 o'clock curfew. I think we can probably get it done before then. So I will be quiet, and I think we're going to turn it off to Derek first and then Kevin.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Derek Redgate. I'm a civil engineer with Solely Engineering. And as you remember, we met back in December and didn't give quite as comprehensive presentation then, which we are planning to do tonight. If you recall, after that December meeting, we did schedule a site walk. We did get that in before snowstorms, which was nice. And I believe a few days before, we actually went out with some stakes, and so you could, when you were out there, you could actually visually see it. We staked the access road and then gave some, where we're crossing the wetlands, some stakes to help you orientate yourself. So I hope that was helpful. Those plans were reviewed by the town engineer, and those comments were incorporated into the latest set of plans that you have. They should be dated 12/12/26. So those 12/12/26 plans went both 2/12, I'm sorry, February 12th, yep. Went both to this commission and planning and zoning. So they're identical. And then we met with planning and zoning on the 17th. So John was alluding to some of the changes that we're making on those plans, but the changes were all to the west of the wetlands, so nothing in our applications or on our 212 plans is materially changing. The town engineer original comments were very limited in being specific to wetlands. There was some specific comments to be a little clearer for erosion control. Some of the drainage comments were focused on drainage towards the west, towards Route 12. And then just to finish up sort of the process here, and I'll hand it over to Kevin, is that we did receive town engineer comments today that were also very limited and much reduced from our original original comments, and we're going to go through those, but in a brief review of those, nothing seemed to materialistically change our plans.
Thank you, Derek. Again, so for the record, my name's Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Offices at 501 Main Street in Monroe, Connecticut. I'm also a certified professional in erosion and sediment control, which may come into play as we talk about some of our plans tonight. So if you could, so the site address, as we've discussed, is at 90 Putnam Pike. We are proposing the construction of 2 industrial buildings. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just an aerial to orient everyone. So the site is located on Putnam Pike, just to the east of 395, and I guess essentially to the south of the high school. Next slide, please. So up on the screen is an aerial, just a more of a zoomed in picture of the site itself. So the site is approximately 58 acres. Nope. No, it's okay. Thank you. One more. Of those 58 acres, approximately just over 2 acres of the site, or 2.13 acres of the site, are wetlands. There's a small wetland corridor which essentially runs from north to south through the center of the site. So as we looked at our design plans, we wanted to make sure that we could propose something that respected the buffers and had very minimal impact to those wetland systems. Next slide, please. So again, in the packet, there's a very comprehensive plan set. Included in that is a survey. Again, this just shows the site does have some pretty extensive topography. I believe the topography ranges from approximately elevation 300 by the street all the way up to elevation 534 in the northeast corner of the site. So there's some pretty extensive grade change that we have to contend with. And those wetland pockets, that wetland corridor kind of sits up towards the middle of the site. So as we were looking at our design, we had to make sure that we could, manage that topography, manage that earthwork and grading, and create a site design that would not have any adverse impact. Next slide, please. So as Derek mentioned and as Attorney Nuff mentioned, so this was a rendering of the original application that was submitted with the 2 buildings with the crossing in between and the long driveway extending from Putnam Pike. I wanted to show the next slide, please, to kind of highlight some of the small tweaks that we've been making to address some comments received from planning and zoning. So what this plan shows in red is essentially a relocation of the access drive a little bit further north on Putnam Pike. This allows us to play with the grades a little bit better and also ensure the correct location for the driveway. And with this, we also made some shifts to the location of Building 1, which is shown in pink on this slide, and the loading dock areas, which are in a yellow box here. And what we were able to do is just shift those slightly away from Putnam Pike itself, create more of a buffer from that one parcel in front of us, and in doing so, we're actually able to remove some pervious area from the buffer itself within the wetlands. So ultimately, as Derek indicated and Attorney Nuff indicated, these changes do not change anything substantially within the area of purview for this commission. As the wetland buffer, and again, it kind of bisects them in between the 2 buildings, the buffer, the activity within those areas is substantially the same with these small plan tweaks, but we wanted to obviously present them to this commission so you could understand that there are some minor tweaks happening. So next slide, please. Again, and this just shows an updated rendering of the new layout with the new driveway location, the building location for Building 1, et cetera. Next slide. So what we do have is, in this plan, I wanted to make sure that we highlighted exactly where these wetland systems are and where the regulated activity is proposed within those buffers. So as you can see, the majority of the site is well outside those regulated buffers. We're maintaining and protecting not only the no-build area, but also a 75-foot buffer from those wetlands, and there's limited activity within that 200-foot broader buffer. And again, the only real activity is really the linear driveway that crosses that wetland corridor. That driveway was located to make sure that we were crossing that wetland system in its narrowest location, to minimize any potential impact. And, you know, we're proud of the plan we're able to create associated with that. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next one as well. So our plan set is comprehensive because of the size of the site, and we wanted to make sure we provided sufficient detail. We have overall plans and also kind of blow-up sites for each of the various portions of the property. Next slide. So this kind of focuses on building one. I just want to kind of touch on some components for this. So we are proposing a 170,000 square foot building with 186 parking spaces with some tractor trailer spaces. You can see the access drive comes in. There's you know, separate access for the passenger vehicle parking for employees, and then independent truck access, which circles around the site to that truck dock on the western side of the site. And again, the only wetland system really exists to the east, which is kind of up gradient from this location, and with that small access road that crosses through it. Next slide. And then for building two, we are proposing for building two is approximately 297,500 square feet, 310 parking spaces, and additional parking spaces for trailers. Again, that access drive comes up from that primary entrance. It has a small crossing through that wetland corridor, and then and again, we were able to separate out the truck traffic primarily from the passenger vehicle parking, employee parking as well. Next slide. And this is just kind of the bottom half of that page. Again, you can see the wetland corridor to the left-hand side of this page, and that's the lower half of the industrial building with some access roads and retaining walls. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, as I mentioned, there are extensive grade changes on the property. So you can see here, this is our overall grading and drainage plan. And we needed to make sure that our access drive could climb up at a reasonable slope, get access to building one, and then extend up to building two. Next slide. So the site has been designed with an extensive stormwater management system that complies with the latest stormwater quality manual by DEEP. We have been able to design this system to provide, you know, full collection and treatment of all stormwater associated with the proposed development. That's routed to, you know, through hooded catch basins with sumps. It's outletted. It is treated through a hydrodynamic separator, which I know this commission is familiar with. You heard a lot about it in the last presentation. And then that's routed into underground detention systems, which can again attenuate the flows. We exceed the water quality volume requirement with DEEP, and then that stormwater is collected, treated, detained, and attenuated prior to being discharged into actually a lower basin, which would then ultimately discharge into the state drainage facility at Putnam Pike. And we've been able to, include in the stormwater management report, reduce the peak flows for all storm events from the 5-year storm all the way up to the 100-year storm. And again, all of the drainage from building one actually is collected below the wetland system. It is treated below the wetland system. So all of the stormwater for building one is all down gradient and does not actually discharge into any wetland systems or anything like that. But we are able to ensure that we have adequate water quality and attenuation in accordance with all of the applicable requirements. Next slide. Building two, again, it's up gradient, so we crossed that wetland corridor. But again, we've been able to design this where we're fully collecting and treating all of the stormwater, routing that into an underground detention system, which is actually shown on the next slide. Thank you. And we have, you know, extensive 155,000 cubic feet of storage for stormwater. That water quality volume is only 58,000 cubic feet, so we're far exceeding what's required. And again, we're able to match and maintain flows or reduce flows from all the existing storm events prior to being discharged into a level spreader, which would ultimately drain towards that wetland corridor. Next slide, please. When we wanted to look at our soil erosion sediment control plan, we wanted to actually take a very detailed look at this as well, so it was designed in phases. The first phase, which is up on the screen now, and we'll touch on these really quickly, we wanted to ensure that there was adequate design for the clearing activities associated with the property. We've identified haul roads, sedimentation traps. All of the traps have been designed in accordance with the Soil Erosion Sediment Control Manual as provided by DEEP. Next slide, please. Starting all the way up at the entrance drive, as you come up, that water will be collected, treated through swales with hay bale check dams into a sedimentation basin. And again, we've been able to design this so that it does create an opportunity for us to collect any sediment-laden water that would be a result of the construction activities and ensure that there would be no sediment disposition into Putnam Pike or really leave the property at all. Next slide, please. As you go up towards Building 1, again, we wanted to make sure we're looking at individual catchment areas, designing traps accordingly, so we could really manage that earthwork operation and ensure that there would not be any adverse impact during construction with the proposed activity. Next slide. As you go up towards Building 2, towards the upper reaches of the site, along the eastern edge of that wetland corridor, again, the same thing. We wanted to ensure that we have adequate silt fence with hay bale backing at the lowest point of limit of disturbance, and we have sufficient check dams, sedimentation basins, and traps upgrading into that to ensure there would not be any sediment-laden water anywhere near that wetland corridor. Next slide, please. Actually, go back one. I did want to touch on. So obviously, we are proposing to cross that corridor in its narrowest spot. And with our soil erosion sediment control plan, we did design to do that using kind of a crane mat system. So it minimizes that disturbance during construction, and then it'll allow it for it to be for the installation of our box culvert, which would go across that to ensure flows through that system post construction. Next slide, please. Again, this is just the lower half of Building 2, and again, we wanted to ensure that we're able to design this so that any of all of that stormwater that would be generated during construction would be collected and protected, and those wetland systems would be protected. Next slide. And then as we get, our second phase of our soil erosion sediment control plan really focuses on the building construction. And with this, in both Phase 1 and Phase 2, we are identifying that any of those slopes that we're creating, we have erosion control mats to protect against, again, any rills or erosion as stormwater, comes down those slopes. Next slide. Again, with the entrance drive, we've shown hatches where all that soil erosion sediment control blankets will be provided. I know that was a comment from the town engineer. That information was shown on the plan, and we can certainly add additional detail to satisfy that comment that he raised. Next slide. For Building 1, again, very detailed soil erosion sediment control plan, identifying exactly, where those traps will be as they're removed, what that stabilization will be, and ensure that there will not be any impact during construction. Next slide. Building 2, again, to the eastern edge of the site, same methodologies here, extensive silt fence, perimeter protection with hay bale backing, and we really have tried to do, really exceed even the requirements to ensure that there would not be any potential impact associated with this project. Next slide. And you can go to the next one as well. We also had, obviously, our proposed utility plan. Now, the site is going to, this is the overall site again. We are proposing to extend a water main approximately just over 1,900 linear feet up Putnam Pike to our proposed driveway, and then extend that water main up to the proposed buildings. Next slide. As part of this, we're actually designing water tanks, one for each building, to ensure we have adequate pressure associated with that. We're proposing fire loop systems around each building. Each building will be served by a propane tank farm, but we are providing underground electric, telephone communications up the driveway, along with that water main extension as well. And you can see through here how that utility corridor stays within our proposed driveway, and will cross under that corridor crossing up to Building 2. You can go to the next slide. Again, for Building 2, we're also proposing and providing that propane tank farm and that water tower to ensure that we have adequate protection for fire flows for the building. Each building will be served by a traditional septic system. Those septic systems, we have done testing with the health department to observe those test holes. The design has been prepared in accordance with public health, Department of Public Health requirements. Next slide. And we've been able to design both of those in locations where there's more than adequate room for that effluent to actually, and both of them are designed where that effluent doesn't even drain towards those wetland corridors, which was an important component. We want to ensure that those will continue to travel through upland areas and not into wetland systems as well. Next slide. Landscaping. So we have an overall landscape plan here, and we've designed our driveway to have overstory trees along the driveway, offset on each side, and where area was limited, we're able to do groups of columnar trees. Next slide. All of our basins, even though they are outside or even outside of the wetland review areas, they have been designed with native seed mixes from New England wetland plants. The sites are designed with overstory and understory flowering trees, shrubs, perennials, ground covers, ornamental grasses, evergreen clusters where needed. And actually 73% of the 400+ plantings that we're proposing are native. That's something that we always make sure we focus on. We want to propose native plants species to ensure that it'll create a good, robust environment with plants that aren't brought in from elsewhere. Next slide. And again, just the overall landscape plan, which highlights a lot of the plantings surrounding the building and landscaped areas. But I also wanted to touch on a little bit, obviously, the wetland corridor crossing and what we're proposing there. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Actually, one more. So through here, again, this shows the overall highlighted area, which really is the upland review area, where we have activity proposed within that buffer. And the crossing itself is one where we are proposing an impact of approximately 1,300 square feet of wetlands with a culvert to support that crossing. But to offset that impact, we are proposing to wetland creation and mitigation for approximately 1,400 square feet. Next slide. So this is actually just a blow up of that crossing. You can see that we have that culvert shown. Where we are crossing, again, we chose that we were able to locate the narrowest point of that wetland system as it flows from north to south. And next slide. And here we can see that we have created a mitigation area, which actually proposes 1,494 square feet of mitigation area. That's been designed so that we're providing the hydraulic connectivity to that existing system with a wet mix seed, overstory trees, wetland shrubs, ferns, logs, stumps, rocks to create a very native and natural environment for that system to flourish and for that wetland system to really expand and create a vibrant mitigation area, which will, more than offset the impact of that linear crossing at its narrowest point. With that, go to the next slide. I know this is really our full-blown presentation of the commission, but obviously the commission is familiar with the project. We had the site walk. We're able to verify the delineation that's out there. So I guess at this point, we'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Well, we may as well start right here. Unexplained what we've been.
So same thing, keep your mics on.
We move mine right around.
If
We're
you-
wondering about the one discharge.
The one discharge that's in the middle of, right there.
Yep. So, yeah, so there's an existing swale in front of the site that we were matching our flows to really match the existing drainage patterns. I will say that during the planning and zoning hearing, that swale starts on our property, it cuts through the parcel in front of us, it conveys off of their property.
Is there a right to drain? That's what we're wondering.
My other question is, if it's a swale, is it an intermittent water course?
It is not an intermittent water course.
Okay.
Our soil scientists went out to the site, they flagged it, and actually Tim is on the site, or is on the the call if there's specific questions for him. But one of the things that we're doing as part of our these modifications is we're going to be able to relocate that discharge. Again, that's well outside the wetland buffer, the regulated area, but we are going to bring that further south so that it no longer discharges into that swale to protect that portion that runs through that neighbor's property. We're going to bring that down, incorporate into our system, which is down gradient of our access road, into a larger water quality basin to ensure that we're again able to collect it, treat it, detain it prior to discharge into Putnam Pike.
So what we're looking at is totally going to change.
The outlet
that one.
for that, yes, that outlet is going to be shifted to the south, so it no longer discharges into that swale. That's correct. And again, that's well outside of the regulated area, which you certainly understand. But that is something, that is one of the drivers
Still a
of
discharge that we were.
some of these
curious about.
tweaks that we wanted to make.
Now, we had asked, and if he's on there, he can talk about it. There was where the wetlands crossing was, and there was a wetlands there. There was a low-lying area basically to the northwest that you were gonna go back out there and check it.
They did test pits.
Did they?
That's in your packet.
In non-wetlands?
Yeah, he went out a few days, maybe a few days after your site walk, and did a few more soil tests, basically confirmed his original locations, and he did provide a memo that explained the exercise that he did, and that was resubmitted in the 1212 package.
And the guy you sent
212.
the guy you sent out for the site work was phenomenal.
Ah.
No, he really was.
He was
a
very helpful,
very informative,
knowledgeable,
very
good.
very good.
Yes.
Sam, yes. Sam's helpful, yes. He's a UConn student, so
Yeah.
that's why.
And the way you staked everything out, that was perfect for us to see out
That's
there. and
great
all
to
that.
hear.
Excellent.
He's our man with the boots.
Oh, okay. Yours is off. We're sharing at the moment.
Okay.
The temporary crossing you described as timber matting, correct? And is the plan to try to span the entire wetland channel there? Or are you gonna run through the entire buffer with a mat? Because the slide looked like it was gonna run through the entire buffer.
So those construction mats, those are they're very popular in use when you have long linear utility corridors, electric distribution lines, things like that. And what they are is they're timber crossings. There are some sets of timbers which run parallel with the flow, and then there are timbers placed on top which span. So I think, based on the crossing, I think we were looking at essentially two sections of timbers that would run parallel and then two spans. So it's probably hard to see. You'd have to zoom in on this. But yeah, so there would be two small locations where those timbers would be running parallel. There we go, perfect.
Okay, the drawing is deceiving.
Oh.
When it was small, it looked like you were running through the whole.
The hatchet, when you're dealing with scale sometimes in bigger picture presentations, even when we do the blow up, sometimes it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see here clearly there are two sets where they're running kind of parallel with the flows and then spans on either side. And those are, with those those are widely used for these types of installations to minimize that disturbance. Then we can drop our box culvert in there and restore everything as part of the construction efforts.
There's no reason Army Corps needs to, excuse me. There's no reason Army Corps needs to get involved, right?
No, nope.
Okay. 'Cause I believe Army Corps considers that fill in a wetland.
Well, so there's a couple of components to that from an Army Corps standpoint. Obviously, the authority to approve and authorize this activity lies with this commission. Once it exceeds a certain square footage, if it was jurisdictional, there would need to be engaged and involved from a permitting process. This falls well below that threshold. But additionally, when we did design our box culvert, there are, when you're doing a crossing like this, Army Corps has specific design guidance for openness ratios and things like that. And we made sure that our proposed access drive and culvert is consistent and compliant with all those requirements. That is something that we do when we do this level of analysis.
Okay, the other thing that we had discussed on the site walk was the freeboard of that box culvert, right? We typically ask for a foot of freeboard above the 100-year storm. That's our standard ask.
Yeah.
Was that looked at?
That was looked at, and we raised it to provide
Okay.
the 1 foot freeboard in the revised design. I remember we talked about that in the original meeting, and then I think talked maybe again on the site walk,
Yes.
and
Yep.
Sam relayed that to me again. So that
Okay.
is included, and
Excellent.
we did provide that. Yep.
I didn't see that noted anywhere, that's why I just wanted.
That was
Sure.
pretty much it from the sidewalk, wasn't it?
Yeah, check those low-lying areas.
Yep.
The
And-
foot of freeboard.
And that was it.
Yeah.
They must be doing septic up here because. they can't
It was
approve
2
it.
septic systems, right? Yeah.
Yes,
One
each
for each
building is served by its own independent septic system, correct.
And have those been approved yet at this point?
So they haven't been approved yet. Generally speaking, it's somewhat out of sequence. They approve something after it goes through the local processes. However, we did do the testing with the health department.
Did you get their, this is suitable?
Yes.
letter? That's
Yes.
what we, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That front
They met us
septic
on site as well when we did the testing.
That front septic system, inside of an aquifer, does it trigger any state review, based off flow?
No, we're still, well, it actually, excuse me, the entirety of the site will be reviewed by the Department of Public Health as well, in addition to just local sanitarian.
Okay.
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
we're missing totally where it is.
Which one? The septic system?
Yes.
For building 1? Hold on.
And 2?
You can go back to the utility plan. If you go back a couple, I'll tell you when to
All right,
stop.
grading and drainage. Read the wrong one.
So this is building 2. If you look just below, there we go. So there's our septic system for building
All
2
right.
with a full reserve.
It's just not on the, we're on the grading and drainage.
Yep. And then if you go back, I think 2 slides. So here you can see the septic system for building 1 is immediately in front of the building. It's right in that location there. We have the full compliant reserve system, and again, that's also well outside of the regulated area and the buffer area.
This one was not full of wetlands issues.
This one,
Yeah,
Again,
rough
and I
issues.
know it's kind of just looking at the different hats, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
obviously, proposed distribution, we've talked about it at a previous meeting. If we ultimately have a tenant in mind as we move forward, presumably we move forward, an aquifer registration would be required, most likely, given the proximity of the building to the wetland. The stormwater system and the on-site septic in those areas, do you feel neither of those would trigger review, or do you, I think the stormwater would, being discharged in that area?
So
Because it's not domestic.
From the aquifer,
Yes.
you mean? Yes, I think potentially there would be. But from a, from an operation standpoint, thankfully the aquifer protection regulations have specific restrictions on what can operate here. We would fully comply with all those requirements, and, we don't see any issue with complying with any and all applicable requirements associated with this project.
I just wanted to ask because a
Yep.
lot of the public comment focused on
Yep.
that.
And again, building 1, the aquifer only exists within the western side of the site closest to Putnam Pike. So it really applies to building 1. Building 2 is fully outside of the aquifer.
And have you had any preliminary talks with Deep for the stormwater, Chris Stone?
We haven't yet. Obviously, this project will require a stormwater general permit for construction. And as I mentioned, I'm a certified professional in soil erosion and sediment control. Our SEC plans have been prepared in accordance with all of their requirements, the SEC manual. And we'll go through that normal course of action for, prior to site clearing and have that general permit before any activity takes place.
Okay. I just didn't know if he had any preliminary feedback for you.
Again, it's a sequence thing, and I know a lot of the comments, and this is, I know, we've done a number of projects in Killingly before, so those are all standard conditions of approval that we can meet, and provide all those, formal approvals once we're through that step. Same thing with DOT approval, OSTA, things like that. We have submitted to the Office of State Traffic Administration preliminarily. We don't see any issues from a traffic standpoint, and again, all of the changes that we've been making through our discussions with P&Z help ensure that this project is fully compliant, and we have all those additional reviewing agencies that we have to satisfy as well.
I'm curious. Aren't you? We're curious, are you planning to phase this? I know it probably wouldn't really affect.
I would say that the site preparation would likely happen in one phase. However, the individual building constructions would be phased based on, securing tenants, and the vertical construction would be phased based on that activity. But the preparation would likely happen in one overall phase.
For both units?
Yeah, I think from an earthwork operation standpoint, it's more, when you look at something of this scale, we'd want to do that in one activity. But then the individual building construction, pavement, building, vertical, stuff like that would happen in a phased approach.
The site work would be.
Correct.
Yeah. Did it look like everything that Dave had listed was addressed on there?
Yeah.
And you had a chance to look at that?
I did.
Did any of you guys see any issues with those? He said this one does not have a lot of wetlands issues.
My only concern is if P&Z has additional requirements, that this might need to get modified again. That's my concern. I don't know if we can condition that in approval.
I bet the attorney would have a clue.
Yeah, I'd love to. They're having all the fun. No, so this is a little unusual that we submitted our application simultaneously. A lot of towns say, go to wetlands, get all their comments, and then come to planning and zoning. It's actually sort of unusual that it was sort of helpful that we went to zoning, got some of their comments. So as you saw from the very beginning, we've already incorporated some of their changes. But yes, could something else change before planning and zoning that would affect our regulated activity? It's possible, but my guess is since our regulated activity is so narrow, like literally and figuratively so narrow,
Really is.
probably not. But if we have to come back, we'll follow the law and we'll follow the regulations if we have to come back. But my guess is we probably won't have to.
And actually, we have both Jonathan and Anne Marie here today. I would assume any action would be on what is proposed. So if something changed, that would not encompass the approval.
Did they submit a full set of revised plans?
Yes.
They did.
Yeah, we have.
These are the old.
Those plans, and then we have what was submitted here tonight, the updated package. We had gotten a modification. It's in the it's in that timeline, part of my staff report, that we had gotten a modifications based off the planning and zoning feedback on February 26th. So that was just that kind of that sketch plan that's in your packet. The updated plan set would be the ones that are in front of you, or that we received tonight. So that would be your answer in regards to that. The ones digitally on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the plan set that's there. We have not received a hard copy, and Dave hasn't had a chance to look at this updated plan set yet.
But there is a full set, is what I'm saying. Not a presentation set. There is a full set we received from them.
Well, again, the changes that we're talking about don't materially affect anything in the buffer or upland review area, with the exception of removing some pavement and reducing the impervious surface, specifically on closer to building 1, where we adjusted some parking. But aside from that,
It would be nice, though, to have them correct.
Yeah.
Would seem like they should.
So you don't think any reason that grading would go one way or the other and into the buffer any further?
No, I think we're very confident with all the activity that we propose within that regulated area, and even in the comments that we've received from planning and zoning, none of them would have any impact in the regulated activity that we're proposing, that is, before this commission.
In terms of time frame, I know that was a question that was asked previously. The 10th, April 10th is the end of the total time frame. April 6th would be our next regular meeting. So if it was a question of additional time to review, say, the full plan set and print, we would have time, but a decision has to be made on April 6th.
I mean, personally, I would feel better if
It was done,
we had a
a real
correct
set,
set.
that's what I meant, a real
Yeah.
set done.
Personally.
And it's not gonna, I don't think there's anything in particular we're looking for to change.
No.
But it would just be nice to have it.
That
for
would allow
housekeeping
for
done and
just
correct.
general more time for public review as well. Even though this is not a public hearing, but it will allow our town engineer to look at it. I know planning and zoning expressed it, wanting to go to third party. That was not an ask of this commission, but as far as.
Well, they have a lot more issues to deal with this application.
It's much
than
more
we do.
complex of an application for planning and zoning
Yes.
than it is for wetlands.
Now, you were also concerned, you were gonna ask Jonathan, instead of them redoing the wetlands, if you could do it somewhere else?
Oh, yeah. Did you ever look into that,
Yeah, he
Jonathan?
said-
I don't believe that, so the question is like off-site improvements in regards to like offsetting the wetlands impact. I don't think this would be a situation where you would seek that. That's done with some permits. There's a fund you can pay into the state, but you can't really direct it, and unless you have property that you have under your control or you're offering additional off-site improvements, I don't think it's something the commission can require.
Right. It's just something we requested in the past, so.
Yeah, in those applications that there was a budding property that was under the same applicant's control, so.
Okay.
Also part of that same wetland system.
Right.
I don't think there's anything massive we're looking for from you guys, other than it is finalized.
Yeah. I mean, I personally don't like to approve a set that is not complete. And, yeah.
Okay, let me say just one thing, and you've been terrific, and I don't want to belabor this. The only change to the regulated activity is the removal of some pavement and the replacement of that with landscaping. That is the sole change in regulated activities from the set that was submitted to you, I think, in December, and what we identified in an email to Jonathan a couple days ago. So I just want to be really clear.
Oh, I can understand that though, but
Right.
typically, you kind of have to follow what your protocols have been and be consistent, and this is what we consistently ask for from people.
That's fine, and it's fine. I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
It's not, oh, we're gonna hold your feet to the fire kind of deal, that's not what it is.
I understood.
That's not what it is.
As much as we love being behind that other application.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if we go to.
Yeah, you just wanted to not have to come back.
April 6th, is it gonna slow you up in any way? Because you don't have planning and zoning yet, do you?
No, it won't.
Okay.
Because planning and zoning will be after us next month as well.
Correct.
And I'm sure they're not ready to act on it this month.
They still have time.
Correct. Correct.
So it's not gonna.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with what he's saying. I mean, I get what.
But we normally do make.
Yes. They usually have a final drawing in front of us when we approve it. And without that final drawing, I don't feel comfortable approving. That's all I'm saying, so.
And that's typically what we've.
Yes.
we've had our-
Fair enough, and we finished in 15 minutes before your curfew.
No, we have more.
We have
still
more
some
stuff, yeah.
Okay, then we better get out of
Yeah.
here.
Motion to continue application 25-1618.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded to continue this application, for action at our April meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And I believe you'll be on the agenda right after.
Microphone. So, microphone.
In case you wanted to know.
Sandy.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, Madam Chair. I mean, you can choose to set the agenda how you like. If it's just a matter of the updated plan set, assuming
I
that's
think
been
maybe
received.
maybe we should run the regular business first,
Okay.
and then the public hearing. I think they might all appreciate that.
Yep.
And I think we have a poor guy that's been sitting here waiting just to have his application received this month as well. Okay, thank you guys. Now we'll move on to new business. Let's finish. Okay, actually, we would still be on unfinished business, application 26-1624 of the Ryan Companies, and that has been tabled.
Yep.
So we'll just move right on to new business. We have two of them. Application 26-1627 of CJJ Adventure for a proposed three-lot subdivision, and that is at 647 Putnam Pike.
Yep, and we have a rep here for that. And we have one, I think, who's joined remotely for that.
Okay. It was a long night for you, wasn't it? And we've already decided we're gonna do all the other business first next month. Okay, can we just have your name and, put on your mic and have your name and address for the record?
Absolutely, everyone. So thank you again, I know it's very late. I'm going to be very brief. For the
Good.
record, I'm Daniel Blanchette. I'm a licensed civil engineer and land surveyor. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, CJJ Adventures. They own a 30-acre property at 647 Putnam Pike, or Route 12. It's located right on the Putnam town line. It's about 30 acres. It has one house already, and they're proposing to cut off 2 new lots. The construction is located on an isolated hill that's completely surrounded by wetlands. And so the driveway is going to involve a wetland crossing to access the upland area. Again, the applications were only submitted a couple days ago. I know the commission, the town staff hasn't had time to look at them yet.
That was a different application.
No, his signs have been plowed up to there from down the road.
Yeah, that's good. Again, I'll have a much more detailed presentation next month when we have more time to discuss this. It's a pretty simple, straightforward project. It's 2 new building lots, about 3,000 square feet.
Nice.
About 3,000 square feet of wetland disturbance for the driveway with the 2 culverts. There's 2 culverts under Route 12, 2 24-inch culverts. There's a pretty small drainage area, about 25 acres.
Seriously, there's a lot there.
More than the 2 warehouses.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Seriously.
What is the criteria for a public hearing?
So generally speaking, public hearings are discouraged in the wetlands regulations unless we find that there is a significant impact or a significant public interest on it. We just received the application. It's on the, it was on the agenda. We've received no comment, but that doesn't mean there's not significant interest as we move forward with the application. Traditionally, on a project like this, I'll say general. Since I've been here for about 10 years, we've done 1 public hearing. I haven't staffed wetlands that whole time, but it is the purview of the commission. You can also choose to hold a site visit. Obviously,
Spring will come.
Assuming the weather
coming.
will cooperate. There's at least this project, the crossing that's proposed is not that far off of an existing driveway. So it's not as much of a trek as another application.
So at this point, we would probably accept it, table it for review and possible public hearing, but it's without a public hearing for now, because it's really whether or not the public wants to, they have more
So-
ability to interact if there's
So
not a
in
public
terms
hearing.
of process, on receiving an application, there is a time frame where a petition could be submitted that would trigger an automatic required public hearing. That's built into your wetlands regulations. It's a standard practice. So normally, if you're indifferent, or, you know, and want to err on your normal practice, you would receive it, potentially schedule a site walk, or pending, you know, weather.
It's just such an eye opener, because that's got more impact than the warehouses.
Sure.
To wetlands. But the reality is, when we don't hold a public hearing, people don't realize they have more of an opportunity to interact and discuss things with us than we do. There's strict guidelines on public hearing.
Yeah, traditionally, you know, this board will suspend the rules
and
and
let
allow
people-
for comment and individuals to go through. We usually will err on the side of caution and ask an applicant if they're okay with that, but that's the normal.
But you were already
process.
aware that this is gonna be a tough one.
Yes.
When were the wetlands flagged?
The wetlands were done by Joe Thoreau
Recently?
recently, yes. Yeah, June 2025, yep.
So, just to clarify, we can send this forward without a public hearing, but if someone can petition to get this into a public
Yes.
hearing, right? Someone
it's-
from the public can petition.
It's based in our regulations, and it's a very low threshold. I can find the exact regulation. If you
No,
need
I
it.
don't think that's, because normally.
That must be the motion.
Normally, we wouldn't have a public hearing.
No, no.
I'm gonna say we accept this without a public hearing and a site walk at a future.
Yeah, because we'll hold off on the site walk, because we're gonna be lucky to get the other one snuck in,
Yeah.
because spring is coming.
You don't think this is gonna raise any concern, because this is 4 dwelling units and there's a sewer moratorium?
So the proposal, as it's submitted right now, has on-site septic. They're Mantis systems.
They're Mantis systems,
That are on their on-site septic. In terms of zoning, duplexes are a permitted use in the rural development zone, on conforming size lots. These actually, I believe, exceed the, required minimum acreage. I would assume partly because of their shape and amount of wetlands, that are on them. But that being said, it is permitted use under zoning.
I'm asking just because of the issues that
Yep.
were raised.
Yeah,
other-
this will also go to planning and zoning as a subdivision. So, and they can choose whether or not there'd be a public hearing on their part. 'Cause subdivisions don't have an automatic.
They automatic.
I think it's resub. is automatic.
Re-subdivisions.
Yeah, I know, but I think Killenly.
Yeah.
Well, and you-
Typically,
Yeah.
Killingly always does a
Always
subdivision. That's
Always-
true.
all
We've had
subdivisions will go to public.
we've had one or two, particularly family ones, where they'll err on the size of not. But most of them do. Yes.
All right, so we have a motion.
Yep, still need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we might get the other one in before 11.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you for sitting now. Okay, next one is application 26-1628 of A. Couch and Sons for a 2-lot subdivision, 245 Yosemite Valley.
I have to leave.
That's yours? Okay.
Recused. I'll,
At this point, are we just going to receive it and,
receive it.
Yep. So I just pulled up the map so that way you guys
okay.
can.
And
can-
Rainey,
can
you'd
look
be
at it.
acting as Paul now. Someday you'll grow up to be Paul.
So just because Paul's mic was muted at the time, for the record, Paul excused himself from the application, so this is a.
And Rainey will be acting as a full voting member.
Yep. This is a 2-lot proposed subdivision with an existing home on the one lot and then the one proposed new lot that is on here. This is on Yosemite Valley Road It's a 3-bedroom ranch, raised ranch, I believe, with on-site septic and well.
All right,
Motion to accept without public hearing, without a sidewalk.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Let's hoop to them. Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
no correspondence in the staff report. You might
So-
get it in the 4 minutes.
Speak
There-
fast.
There was a correspondence about aquatic treatment that I have. It's in my office. I left it down there with all the other application materials, but it is just for one of the fire ponds, I believe South Killingly, which is an annual application with the state. Traditionally, we have no comment on that one. Staff report under authorized agent applications, application 261625 of Chartier Lake Association LLC to construct a 6x6 addition to relocate a bathroom and fix a sewer pipe. That approval was granted by Allison Brady, our other authorized agent. We both visited the cottage. It's a very, very small, very rustic little cottage, and it is a very minor addition. We saw no impacts whatsoever. If anything, the presence of a potential sewer line issue or lateral issue would be mitigated with the application. I have no other monthly zoning or wetlands report, and the town council, there is no town council liaison present at this time.
I'm very, very surprised, and Paul was mentioning that too. With something like this going on,
Yep.
yeah,
Very disappointed.
Yep.
Should go on the record too.
Yes.
I believe it just did.
Yep.
Yeah, just make sure your mic's on so that they
My
can hear.
last name is Mick, not Matt.
Make Tom.
It's gotta be autocorrect.
So,
Way past my bedtime.
yeah. So I know, Chris, you had relayed during our recess that you wanted to convey to the town manager the lack of the liaison tonight, and I will.
Well, if it's on the record,
Okay, but I'll make sure Brian's aware.
yes.
Yep.
They should, one liaison should have been here for tonight's meeting. This is a very important meeting.
Yes.
I'm very surprised though, because
very much
I
agree.
know Ed
Just
is
make sure your
always
mic's
the
on.
alternate, but Ed usually goes to everything.
Yes.
So, do you have a motion to adjourn? Before?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.